Can you hear us, Matthew? Are you still there, Matthew? Oh, there you go.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, great. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. You're here with the community panel that is responsible for interviewing, reviewing candidates for the Board of School Commissioners. I'm Ari Giles. I'm with the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. I'm helping facilitate this process. I'll just give you some names and organizations of the individuals represented here. We have Frank Patinella from ACLU. We have Leah Stearns from the Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City. We've got Brianna Kaufman from Baltimore Family Alliance. We have Jocelyn Providence from the Baltimore Teachers Union. We have Tasha Marshall from Disability Rights Maryland, Roger Schulman from Fund for Educational Excellence. We have Mackenzie Allen from Maryland Alliance of Public Charter Schools, Jason Green from Parent and Community Advisory Board. We have Charles Smith from the PTA Council of Baltimore City, and we have Dr. Deborah Brooks from the Mayor's Office of Children, representing the Mayor's Office as the Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. And so I'll just really quickly we'll go through, they have questions that they've selected that they'll ask. We have 30 minutes for the interview. So I want to just be mindful of giving thorough responses, but responses that are succinct. One thing I also wanted to note to you is that this is an open meeting, so it will be recorded and posted online accordingly. And so from there, I'll start and start with Frank Patinella from ACLU for the first question.
Hi,
Sounds good.
Ari. I'm for some reason not able to open a Word document, and I've been messing around for it for the past 10 minutes, and I had the questions open, but can I just we can go to the next person in line for question.
Okay, Leah Stearns from Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City.
All right. The question that I have for you today is, please share your understanding of the current priorities of the operations of Baltimore City Public Schools, including the blueprint for success, if you're familiar with it.
Absolutely. Well, first, I wanted just to thank the board. Thank you for this opportunity. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the school board position. And so to answer your question, really thinking about board priorities, obviously retaining educators, rigorous instruction, and really modernizing the facilities that are taking place. In terms of the blueprint, really excited that Governor Moore fully funded the blueprint for educational excellence. And, I also know that, a priority is to increase the 4-year graduation rate, literacy, and algebra proficiency as well.
Thank you.
Great. And for the next question, we have Brianna Kaufman from Baltimore Family Alliance.
Good evening. Can you share how you see the role of the CEO and the role of the school board, and how do they differ? How do they overlap, and how do they interact?
Absolutely. So really the role of the school board is, from a governance perspective, really developing policy to help govern the school board, really a fiduciary responsibility. I previously served on the Board of Regents at Morgan State University, and really, had a fiduciary responsibility there as well. The board is also responsible for hiring a CEO, adopting budgets, approving curriculums, and it's very different. It's different than the CEO in the fact of managing the day-to-day operations of the school board and really helping the implementation of those policies that the board is developing and creating.
And next we will have Jocelyn at the Baltimore Teachers Union.
Hi, yes, I'm Jocelyn from the Baltimore Teachers Union. I'm also a school-based employee in Baltimore Teachers Union. And so my question is union related. So part of the role of the Board of School Commissioners is to negotiate with the employee unions. What do you know about the current issues and the dynamics of the school board and unions that represent city schools employees? Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Answering that with the question of understanding that my wife is currently a school teacher. I'm in Baltimore. My mother is also a retired teacher, so very familiar with unions. I know that Baltimore City, the unions just negotiated for a pay increase for the teachers, so really excited about that. And unions are a critical role in my experience around making sure that teachers and staff and all that are a part of the unions are really taken into account. And so I think that there should definitely be a strong relationship between the board and unions.
Great. Next,
You're welcome.
we have Disability Rights Maryland. Tasha Marshall.
Yes, good evening. Can you give me an example of a time you were asked to respond to the needs of people or a student with disabilities?
Great question. From personal experience, my sister is actually diagnosed with autism. Me and my wife, we started a fund to help support young adults who are who are autistic to pursue higher education, secondary degrees, et cetera, after high school. So very familiar with disability rights, and for disclosure, I'm also a board member on Disability Rights of Maryland as well, and a strong advocate for disabilities and equal access across the city of Baltimore.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Roger Shulman, Fund for Educational Excellence.
Yeah, thanks so much for being with us. The school system has approximately a $1.7 billion budget. As you talked about earlier, part of the role of the board is to have approved the budget and have some oversight over the system's budget. Can you talk about budgets that you've had oversight over, the role you played, and sort of the size and scale of those budgets? Please, sorry.
Absolutely. So during my time at Morgan State, like I mentioned, served as a regent there, and responsible obviously for fiduciary oversight. And the way that we looked at it at Morgan was obviously operating budgets versus capital budgets. And so the operating budget was around, I believe at that time, between 15 to 16 million for the university, and then the capital improvements. And I know, the city schools obviously is going through the 21st century school plan, but at Morgan, I believe it was around 100 million in terms of capital projects we were requesting from the state from funding. So, overseeing the projects of the university and making sure that we're using the dollars in a fiscally responsible way.
We have next we have Mackenzie Allen from Maryland Alliance for Public Charter Schools.
Hi, what role do you see charter schools play in the city schools portfolio?
Absolutely. I definitely believe charter schools play a great role in the city schools portfolio. I'm very aware of different charter schools throughout Baltimore City, Baltimore Collegiate, Baltimore Leadership School for Young Women, and I'm a strong advocate for school choice and students to be able to choose whatever school fits their needs. As I talked about, obviously with my own sister and different experiences as well, I'm a strong proponent of ensuring quality education for all students.
Jason Green, Parent Advisory, Community Advisory Board.
Hi, Matthew. Thank you for joining us. Please describe the role you think families and communities should play in decision making at the district level.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jason, for that question. Great to see you as well. I definitely believe families and schools play a strong role and a very pertinent role, obviously, in the school board, I think, in terms of decision making. Obviously, having a seat at the table and really, crafting solutions. I think, it's important, particularly within Baltimore, that we work in partnership, we work in collaboration. And it's extremely important that, we have parents, teachers, all at the table, particularly as it pertains to our children.
Charles Smith, PTA Council.
Good afternoon, Mr. Reed. And following up on Jason's question, can you tell us a time you were charged with fostering partnerships or building a coalition to achieve a specific goal? And please note the types of partners that you were engaged with.
Great question. So I can, talk specifically about, I mentioned that me and my wife started a fund to help support, young adults who are on the autistic spectrum within Baltimore. Really, we rallied, a lot of folks across the city, whether it's philanthropy, community leaders, et cetera, to really, develop either whether it's forums or panels, et cetera, to talk about disabilities within Baltimore. But then also to raise, obviously money for the fund to disperse in scholarships, et cetera, across the city. So, I have strong experience in rallying folks together and specifically even at Morgan as well. Serving on the board there, all stakeholders, whether it's, Northwood or, board members, community members, et cetera, to accomplish the various capital projects in partnership with the president there.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Dr. Brooks in the mayor's office.
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Reeds, or afternoon. What was the hardest decision impacting youth that you've had to make? Describe how you made the decision and the result of that decision.
It's a great question. I think the hardest decision impacting youth, obviously, I think would be, personal. Like I mentioned, my sister has autism, and seeing in the school that she was in, just some of the challenges around just access to education, working with community partners to figure out the gaps of where she could take advantage of different opportunities across the city, and building those partnerships and helping to bring it into the school. That obviously is personal to me, but I think obviously impacts students and what was very difficult as well.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And just a quick time check, there are about 15 minutes left, so we'll go back up to you, Leah, for another question.
All right, so my question is, share your impression of an alignment between the school board and parent/community. How would you respond when a parent or community is not aligned?
Absolutely. I think a perfect example of this, obviously could be during COVID. Very impressed with how the school system was able to respond, in 2020 when the entire world was trying to figure out how we were going to make it during the COVID pandemic. I know that there was conversation around, virtual and, when it was time to come back, what a safety plan kind of looks like for students. And I know that several parents obviously had concerns for students coming back to school, what that would look like for their particular child, and how that impact really would affect their educational outcomes. And so, I definitely think that when there is misalignment and when the school system might be pushing something or encouraging students to do something, I think that one, it's an opportunity to bring all the folks and stakeholders to the table to be able to figure out you know what is the best solution. And I think that, like I mentioned, like actually giving parents and families a space in decision making, the question that Jason asked is really important. So I'm a firm believer in that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
The next question will go to Brianna Kaufman, Baltimore Family Alliance.
Tell us why you believe you would be a good school commissioner. Please include in your answer if there's a particular issue that motivates you to serve.
I appreciate that. One, I'm a native Baltimorean, and like I mentioned, proud husband of a teacher, and mom is a former educator for over 20 years in the school system. Have a sister that has unique needs within the community. Outside of that, I think one, my experience in management and being able to oversee and having these large budgets is really important. The business acumen as well, but also the personal connection to Baltimore, to the city. And I think one particular issue that definitely motivates me the most is really retaining educators, and as I mentioned, disabilities as well. I think ensuring that all students have access to equitable education is really important. And also ensuring that we're actually retaining educators in the system. We're recruiting and we're really attracting people to Baltimore City. I'm really passionate about that because, as I mentioned, as a native Baltimorean, I'm really passionate about the city and ensuring that our children and our children's children have the education that they need to succeed.
Jocelyn?
Thank you, Jocelyn, Baltimore Teachers Union. My next question is, so part of the role of the Board of School Commissioners is to hold the CEO accountable. Tell us what ways or topics you would hold the the district CEO accountable, and how do you think the board should evaluate the CEO? Like what components of the CEO's job should be assessed in that evaluation process? Thank you.
Absolutely, great question. Always love that question. During my time at Morgan as well, I served on the president's evaluation committee every year. So really looking at the strategic plan for Morgan and really aligning those objectives. So I view it as the same way. I think looking at the blueprint, looking at the board priorities, and really developing a matrix to be able to understand performance on a yearly basis is important. I know that obviously the particular goals around instruction, retention, stakeholders, facility management, et cetera, and really, looking at how we're measuring against those goals. And I think that that's extremely important on a yearly basis to ensure that we'll be meeting the goals every year.
Tasha?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tasha Marshall, you next.
Sure. Let's see. What would you consider your most important leadership experience to date?
It's a great question. So one, personally, obviously, as a husband, leading my family is extremely important to me. outside of that, I definitely think, serving on the Board of Regents at Morgan State University, really being in the higher education system, and, being responsible for student success, university, from all walks of life, and from all grounds, et cetera, that has to say has been my leadership journey.
Am I the only one hearing the interruptions or the choppy sound?
Yeah, no, it's here too.
Okay.
Would you mind repeating your response there?
Oh, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I was saying that I definitely think that serving on the Morgan State University Board of Regents was incredibly, a highlight in my leadership journey. Being responsible for student success in higher education, um, is a big responsibility. And also, being responsible for ensuring that, Morgan, we were able to grow, capital buildings, capital expansions, and ensuring that, we're fiduciarily, from the state of Maryland spending the money accordingly. So I would definitely say that that's a highlight.
Thank you.
Roger.
Yeah, absolutely.
Roger Schulman again with Fund for Educational Excellence. I want to go back to one of the questions you answered earlier about how to engage families and parents in the board. And I really appreciated your response about how important it is to do that. Can you share a little bit, whether it was on the Morgan board or any other board you've been on, and how you actually operationalize that or do that in practice, get feedback from stakeholders to help you make decisions?
Absolutely. I definitely, I think one what's really important is establishing listening tours. One, people just ultimately want to be heard, and that, in not only in listening but action. So I really think the first step is, taking a step back, listening, hearing what's going on in communities, and then, working with, existing board members who are currently, already on the board to figure out, what does their engagement look like? How have they, previously engaged? I think is important. I think also, creating, mechanisms for office hours and for spaces where you publicly are making yourself available for people to chat. And then outside of that too, I think, the town hall format is always, important as well to operationalize and ensure that, you're able to kind of hold yourself accountable and not only just have board meetings, but have, other convening mechanisms where people across all different parts of the community can take a part.
We have about 3 minutes left. Next question will go to Mackenzie.
I just want to double check. We skipped Frank again, and I don't know if he wanted to ask a question. So I just want
he asked for us to continue his services.
Got it. Sorry, I just wanted to check. What do you know about the current landscape and/or dynamics of the school board? And what is one thing that you think you could bring and change to that?
Sorry, could you repeat the first part of the question? I couldn't hear the first part of the question.
What do you know about the current landscape and/or dynamics of the school board?
Great. Okay. Thanks so much. So, obviously, I know that currently the school board is partially appointed by the mayor, and then also we have elected school board members as well, who comprise the board. I previously talked about the board priorities as well. Different committees that the board comprises of: the strategic planning committee, operations, finance, et cetera, policy, to really ensure that the school board is operating effectively. And I think might have missed the second part of your question.
What is one thing that you would bring to the board that would be different?
Absolutely. One thing I think, bringing on the board that would be different, obviously is lived experience. I know that a couple board members, bring lived experience as well in terms of, having children that are in the system. And also I know a member on the board as well that has a child that has disabilities. But I think what's unique about my story is really um, obviously being, native to Baltimore, having, business and management experience, strategic planning experience as well, and really long-term thinking. And I'm really excited about the priorities that Dr. Sanalisis just announced around the portrait of a graduate, around student wholeness, leadership, and academics. I think that those are really important. And so, I know bringing to the board, I'll be able to bring that strategic thinking and, really thinking how the board can expand and continue to serve the students of Baltimore.
Next, we would have Jason Green.
Sure. Question is, how would you advocate for young people or parents who believe the school board doesn't listen to them?
Question. One is, I hope that's gathered throughout this call, is that I'm definitely a strong advocate. On one, like I talked about earlier, creating mechanisms where people actually feel heard, I think is really important. And, I think to combat some of that, obviously showing up in spaces, not just showing up to schools, and things like that, but showing up to union meetings, showing up to parent alliance meetings, and being vocal and active in the community. I think the more that you show up for others, the more people will show up for you as well. And so that's kind of how I've always approached community building and community relations, is, really just putting yourself out there, and, also understanding what you don't know as well. I think that that's always an important trait, and willingness to learn. And so I definitely think that, that has always been an important trait of mine, is, understanding, that one, I don't know everything, but, I have a willingness to listen, and, convening people that do have, more of an understanding is a strong skill set of mine. And yeah, I think that, folks that community members that feel as if, people are not listening to them on the school board, like I mentioned, to show up in their spaces and to continue to know, like, we are, working together, and, we might not always agree or come to, understanding, but we are hearing you and we are listening.
So we'll have two more quick questions because we did get started around 4:05 of 4:35, so we will give you the full 30 minutes. So Charles Smith.
Thank you again. Could you give your what you consider the grade for the school system is currently on an A to F grades average, and tell us why you feel that would be the proper grade you would give the school system currently? Did I make that clear?
Okay. Yes. Great question. Just to give a part to that too, I think, I've been impressed with a lot of the work that, externally has really been done, that I've seen come from, plans, blueprint, really, I'm really excited for that. I would definitely say, a B as a grader on myself as well. I think but there's always room and opportunity for improvement. But in terms of what I've seen in terms of just legislative advocacy, working to ensure student wholeness, I really like the direction and the framework that's being developed. Obviously, we've all seen the reports around, areas of improvement around test scores, et cetera. But I definitely think that, focusing in on the key areas that have been identified that I've seen, and we're on the right track.
Thank you.
Dr. Brooks, you'll have the last question.
Thank you. Please share how you would define equity. What specific strategy would you use to incorporate equity in your governance style?
I appreciate that. I define equity as everyone really having the same chance and opportunity for success. And the way that I think about it in my governance style is really looking at it at a framework of ensuring, particularly, for the school board, and the way that I've thought about it always is, are we doing the best thing for every child possible? And that obviously requires a wide net of voices at the table to ensure that equity is a part of the strategy. And so I definitely think that, if you're able to expand the voices, you'll be able to increase the equity in the room, and it shouldn't be a space where voices are silenced. But really going to this places and spaces in the community that are often heard and often not voiced is how I would define equity, and ensuring that we actually have those people at the table when it's time for decision making, and it all goes into budgets as well, because I'm a firm believer that in a budget is really, you're really showing the equity that I know is a buzzword now, but in the budget is really, we're saying and defining priorities as well.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. We made it through 2 full rounds. I appreciate your participation today. If you have maybe 30 seconds, if you have anything else you want to share before we close out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, I just wanted to thank the community panel for this opportunity. I know that there's obviously been scheduling, so I appreciate your time. I know it's a lot on your end as well to go through all the interviews. So really appreciate the opportunity. Just wanted to reiterate as well, proud Baltimorean and really committed to serving Baltimore. And I appreciate I appreciate all the roles that the community panel has as well, and all the work that you're doing in the community. And if there's any way that I can help uplift the work that you're doing, I would love to do that, and would love to stay connected.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right. So we will go to the next interviewee, who I do see is present here, Dr. Joel Bratton Jr. So we'll use the same style that we did for the last interview. I want to give Dr. Bratton a moment to join in here. Camera. Good afternoon, sir. Thanks for joining us. My name is Ari Giles, Chief of Policy and Partnerships here at the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. I'll briefly just go through the list of individuals who are going to be here for the interview panel this afternoon, and then we'll jump into questions. Just a reminder that this is open meeting. It's being recorded and it's available for the public as we're starting here. So we have represented from ACLU Frank Patinella. We have Associate Student Congress of Baltimore City, represented by Leah Stearns. We have Baltimore Family Alliance, represented by Brianna Kaufman. Baltimore Teachers Union, represented by Jocelyn Providence. Disability Rights Maryland, represented by Tasha Marshall. Fund for Educational Excellence, represented by Roger Schulman. Maryland Alliance for Public Charter Schools has represented by Mackenzie Allen. Parent and Community Advisory Board, we have Jason Green with us from there. PTA Council, Baltimore City, we have Charles Smith. We also, and we have representing the Mayor's Office, Dr. Deborah Brooks, who's Executive Director, Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. And so we'll go through, and if you could just introduce yourself, sir, and then I'll pass it off to the first person who will be asking the first question.
Sure, good. Well, I guess it's good evening to everyone. I'm Dr. Bratton. I'm the Deputy Chief for the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office. I work in the Division of External Affairs.
Great, thank you. So the first question will be asked by, I think Mr. Patinello is having some issues. I'm just going to give him an opportunity if he wants to chime in. If not, I'll go to the next interviewee. I know he's chimed in, but he's having some issues with his technology.
Thank you. I'm gonna defer to the rest of the members and listen in and take notes. And thank you very much.
All right.
Welcome, Dr.
Thank you, sir. The Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City, Leah Stearns.
All right, so my question is, please share your understanding of the current priorities and operations of Baltimore City Public Schools, including the blueprint for success, if you're familiar with it.
Yes, basically, as it relates to school wholeness, school literacy, and also academics. So I was a part of the blueprint when I worked with the Baltimore City Public Schools some years ago, and so I definitely understand that process. And very passionate about the school wholeness process as well.
Thank you.
Brianna Kaufman, Baltimore Family Alliance.
Good evening. Can you share how you see the role of the CEO and the role of the school board? How do they differ? How do they overlap? And how do they interact?
Well, I think, with the school board, for me, working on board previously, it's about having engagement and also helping the CEO execute her strategic plan and making sure that she execute that plan in a way that is equitable to all the students in Baltimore City, and the board just making sure that they are actually just partnering with her when she is trying to produce those strategic goals, the strategic plan.
Next, we'll go to Jocelyn.
Hi, yes. Good afternoon, Jocelyn Providence, Baltimore Teachers Union. So part of the role of the Baltimore School Commissioners is to negotiate with the employees' unions. What do you know about the current issues and/or dynamics school boards and unions that represent city schools employees are currently happening?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question. I know the layout as it relates to negotiation and the unions, like Pizzazza mainly works with the leadership, principals, assistant principals, anyone in the leadership capacity. BTU basically works with teachers. And I want to say PRSP, I think it is. Also part of Baltimore Teachers Union as well. Being a part of that process, I've seen how the unions have worked well with the CEO and also the board as it relates to making sure teachers in particular making a fair wage and making sure it's equitable across the state of Maryland. And I've seen that process work. In addition, that we also retain teachers based on the other jurisdictions to make sure that we retain those teachers.
And next we'll go to Tasha at Disability Rights.
Sure, thank you. How familiar are you with the legal rights of students with disabilities and specifically the rights of students with disabilities in the state of Maryland?
Yes, pretty much. I have relatives or cousins who go to Baltimore City Public Schools currently who have had challenges as it relates to disability, and so I'm very in tune to the IDA, and also some of the relatives are having behavior issues as it relates to the 504 and the IEP process, and so very familiar with that process. And again, when I look at it, I look at it from an equitable standpoint, when students with disability. And I think, in this case, we also need to bring those advocates to work with the school board and also to the schools to make sure that the accommodations are being made to those students who are with disabilities.
Thank you.
Arthur?
Hi. I think you're probably aware, the school system has approximately a $1.7 billion budget. And one of the roles of the board is to approve that budget and have oversight over that budget over time. Can you share any experiences you have overseeing or managing complex budgets, and give us some sense of what exactly your role was in that and what the scale or the size of that budget was?
Right. So just recently, I was on a board of National Philharmonic, which is the orchestra that's close to the BSO here in Baltimore. And I think during the pandemic, it really took a toll on the arts in particular. And we had to figure out a way that we could keep our conductors and our musicians on board as it relates to the climate that we were in as it relates to the pandemic. And so we had to, make sure that, from an equitable standpoint, that we, we had to lay off some folks, but we also did it in a way that we provided them with resources as well. And then there were some that we had to scale back on some of the programming so that we could keep some of those musicians. And so, when you're working with the budgets, particularly in large organizations, you don't want to lose folks, but you had to make the best decision as it relates to the money that you have on hand and the money that you're bringing in. And so just being a part of that process, gave me the opportunity to look at that, to make sure that whether it's job cuts or layoffs, that we do it in an equitable way. And that we also provide resources for those folks who will be impacted.
Mackenzie?
Hi, my question is, what role do you see charter schools play in the city schools portfolio?
Whether it's community schools and charter schools, I believe that I tackle with that because a lot of our schools that have become charter schools were regular traditional schools, and I just think that when we talk about the fair people funding and schools that are Title I schools, I just want to make sure that money is not taken away from regular schools and going to charter schools, that they're all on an equitable platform. I do like how some of the charter schools are run, particularly particularly with smaller class sizes, also as it relates to extended services. So I like how that format is played out. I just want to make sure that it's on an even keel with not just community schools, but also our regular schools as well.
Jason?
Thank you. Please describe a role you think families and communities should play in decision-making at the district level.
I really believe that families should be from the beginning, because at the end of the day, that we're making decisions for their children and their families. When I look at, particularly during the pandemic, we saw things as virtual learning was very crucial for families and children. And I think, as we roll that platform out, that, we needed more input from families to make sure that they were, set up to accommodate their children during that process. And not just from the virtual standpoint, but also as, we had students who didn't eat. And so we wanted to make sure that we communicated with families as it relates to, how their children can be fed. So that, that was very crucial for me as it relates to bringing families and communities together, or families and children together.
Charles?
Good late afternoon. Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
As you know, sometimes the school board will not mesh with what the direction that the community parents would like it to go in. They may be looking at two different areas. They may not, let's just say they butt heads. How would you go about trying to bring them together? How would you go about trying to work with the board and the parents and the communities that they serve?
You know, that's a good question. And one of the things that come to my attention is when schools are being, communities are being impacted when schools are closed. And in particular, you know, a lot of parents don't know the reason why these particular schools are closing, maybe because of the attendance is normally the driving force behind that. And I think that you have to, again, bring parents to the table just to educate them on the process. And also make them comfortable in a way that if those students are going to be going to another school in a different part of the town, that, you know, safety also comes in play, so that we have to engage parents from that perspective. And we have to constantly make sure that at the end of the day that the children is in our best interest in whatever type of move that we're trying to make as it relates to, let's say, that school closure.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dr. Brooks?
Yes. Good afternoon. What was the hardest decision impacting youth that you've had to make? Describe how you made the decision and the result of that decision.
Yes, I can. There was, this was in the higher ed. So I taught at Bowie State University. I was administrator there, and there was a student who basically did not come to class, but he wanted to pass. And he brought his father and advocating for him. And basically, you know, we had to, you know, I had to tell a student that, you know, he may not be successful because he did not show up for class. He did not show up for class. So I was able to, you know, speak with the dean at that particular time, and we came up with some type of rubric where that he could be successful. He may not was going to get the grade that he thought he was going to get, but what we wanted to do is make sure that young man was successful because he was having other issues in other classes when we found out. But because his parent came up and it was very advocate for the student, we was able to put him in a process where he was able to pass. And so it was a win-win situation for us and the family, because one, we didn't want to lose that student because he got discouraged about coming to school. So we worked with that family, and we also provided resources for that student. And with those resources, we brought the parent so that we all kind of had to put like a plan together so that student would be successful for the rest of the school year.
Thank you.
And we'll go back around for another round. We'll start with Leah.
All right. Share a time where you had a change of heart and how you communicated that change to the people who were impacted.
Well, just what I just spoke about the young man. Again, you know, when he was failing, and I had to, you know, tell his father that, you know, he has not been successful because he didn't put in the effort that was warranted. And so once we came up with a plan to make him successful, you know, the father was pretty much, you know, happy with the outcome. And the latter part that young man, you know, he ended up graduating from that particular college.
Thank you.
Brianna?
Tell us why you believe you would be a good school commissioner. Please include in your answer if there is a particular issue that motivates you to serve.
Yes, I was from Baltimore, native of Baltimore. I went to Baltimore City Public Schools, from middle school, elementary school, high school. And I have seen a drastic change when I gone there, and I put my daughter through public schools as well. So I know that in the right direction, public schools can be successful. one of the things that I'm really big on, it's, is attendance, particularly when it comes to truancy, young people not going to school. And in the position that I am now, when I see students that are out, during school time, I used to see back in the day that, we didn't have a lot of kids, in our streets. And so when we look also, and I take that as it relates to the crime issues, I see that, yes, the crime is going down, but there's an uptick of juvenile crime. And so when I'm looking at these young people out, so we have to really tackle truancy / attendance, and we have to come up with some mechanisms of how we're going to address that. Because what it looks for me is that we're going into the school of pipeline, because we're seeing a lot of young people that should be in school, and some of them are committing those crimes. And so we got to figure out a way that we can support them and their families, so we don't have those young people out on our streets during school time.
Jocelyn?
Jocelyn, Baltimore Teachers Union. So part of the role of the Board of School Commissioners is to hold the CEO accountable. Tell us what ways or on what topics you think that the district CEO definitely needs to be held accountable, and how do you think the evaluation process should be for the board evaluating the CEO? Like, what components should be assessed? Thank you.
That's a very good question. And I think I want to add something to it. I mean, we all have a strategic plan, and that's like the bylaws, what we have to follow. But in the work that I do, I've seen when we talk about school wholeness, I see safety as a real big issue. And so also my dissertation was on academic success of African American males. I want to see, a lot on academics, particularly as it relates to black males, right? And so how would, if there's a grade I would give her, that's what you're asking. I think that, for me, we just need to add more to the blueprint. And I think that we need to really step out of the box sometimes and actually look at some of the data that we see that's influenced, crime in our city as it relates to young people. So school safety is really big for me.
Tasha?
Please share how you would define equity, and what specific strategy would you use to incorporate equity in your governance style? I'm sorry.
Thank you for the question. Equity for me is, and we always talk about zip codes, right? And I think that equity should be spread out amongst all communities in Baltimore City. And I think that we all need to play a part in that process. Folks from Roland Park shouldn't have better services than folks who live in West Baltimore. So I think as we lay out that plan, that we look at when we talk about the whole child, we look at the whole community, and with that is the young people. That's how equity should be more inclusive to the community that we serve.
Roger?
Thank you. You had talked earlier about the importance of parent engagement and the role that it plays. Can you talk about a specific time where you had to engage stakeholders before you made a decision, and what that process looked like, how you got feedback from your most critical stakeholders?
Yeah, right now we have two things in the state's attorney office as it relates to juvenile. When we talk about the increase of carjacking and things of that nature, particularly juveniles and in particular areas. So what we have done is gone at community meetings, also, having people to come to the office and voice their concerns as well. And so that we can make, again, we talk about equitable, that we make an equitable decision on how we want to change laws or present laws to be changed. And so I think that you have to engage communities in spaces that maybe that's not traditional. You gotta do some untraditional and some traditional. But I think that you have to take those issues to the community and let them voice their concerns and how you make your decisions.
Mackenzie?
The Board of School Commissioners will be tasked with negotiating a contract with the CEO or new CEO of city schools in the next year or several years. Please provide your perspective on what factors should be used to evaluate the contract.
Well, I think one thing is that retention and retention of particular African American male teachers, getting more African American male teachers in our schools. Again, I would also put more emphasis on safety, particularly for our schools. I remember there was a push that we take school police out, don't have their weapons and things of that nature. And within the last year, we had a lot of issues as it relates to issues in our schools. So school safety, equity as it relates to retention, in particular of African American male teachers.
Next we have Jason.
Thank you. So share your impression of the alignment between the school board and parents and community. How would you respond when parents or the community are not aligned?
Again, for me, and I do this every day in the job that I do now, is that making sure that I'm accessible. And again, that's them coming to my office, me going to community meetings, and again, meeting them in places where it's not always traditional. Also listening to them. What I've heard, is that a lot of times stakeholders voice their concerns, but it never get heard. And so again, make sure that I put those parameters where I can hear their voices and being able to have those discussions with my colleagues and align it with the CEO as well.
Charles?
Looking overall at the Baltimore City school system, on a scale of A to F, what grade would you give the school system overall, and why would you give it that grade?
Yes, I would say a C+, and I think that from the time that I've gone to school until where I see it now, I think that we can do much better, and particularly when I have to horn on this is school safety, and also making sure our students, when they persist, that they are able to compete in the world, able to go to a college and compete. A lot of times I speak to employers, they say our students are not employable. They don't have the skills. When I went to school, I was able to take home ec, wood shop, things of that nature, but particularly home ec, kids don't have those social skills, just etiquette skills. So I think we kind of have to go back and revisit some of the things that worked when you and I went to school.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And Dr. Brooks, you'll have the last question.
Thank you. So I've heard you mention, as you've responded to multiple questions around safety. So what role do you think the school board plays in ensuring schools are safe and all the district's students, employees, and families feel welcome and secure in our schools?
Well, I just recently heard that there's going to be, schools will have lawns, and I think kids go through, I guess, I forgot what you call the security. But I think that we have to, make communities, communicate with communities about what our plans are as it relates to safety. We also need to, I believe, work with other stakeholders in our community to work with different schools and those particular schools that have had some severe safety issues. Like I said, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes ability to raise our school system, because we need those other stakeholders to help us. School police can't do it by themselves. So we have to put some assurance that families will be okay when this child goes to school.
And just as we're closing out, just want to give you an opportunity to share anything else that we may have missed, or any additional information you would like for the panel to have.
Well, I first I want to thank the panel for having this discussion, having me for this discussion. I'm a native of Baltimore, gone to college here, went to high school here. I'm all about the public school system here in Baltimore. But again, I have to really put the emphasis on school safety. And I think that we just have to do a better job as it relates to school safety. And I think our academics would definitely, will be much better once we get the school safety piece fixed. And I just look forward to moving forward in the process.
Great. Thank you for your time this evening, sir. Appreciate it. All right. And as we transition to the next candidate, Cecilia Calero, I do see Cecilia has joined, so I will give Cecilia a moment to come on camera. Okay, I see you here, Cecilia. Great. Good evening. My name is Ari Giles. I'm Chief of Policy and Partnerships in the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. I'm helping facilitate this interview this evening. I'll quickly, Cecilia, I'll go through the attendees that are here, and then they'll each have the opportunity to ask questions. I'll name, the individuals, they'll go through and ask questions. Just wanted to note to you that this is an open meeting, and it will be recorded and available online. With that, I'll just get started by going through the individuals we have here. We have from ACLU, Frank Patinella. From Associated Student Congress of Baltimore, we have Leah Stearns. From Baltimore Family Alliance, we have Brianna Kaufman. Baltimore Teachers Union, we have Jocelyn Providence. From Disability Rights Maryland, Tasha Marshall is joining us this evening. We have Fund for Educational Excellence. We have Roger Schulman. Mackenzie Allen's joining from Maryland Alliance of Public Charter Schools. We also have Jason Green from Parent and Community Advisory Board. We have Charles Smith from the PTA Council of Baltimore City. And we have Dr. Deborah Brooks representing the Mayor's Office as Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. And so, Cecilia, if you could just start by introducing yourself, and then we'll start going through the interview questions with the community panel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sasia. I'm not native to Baltimore City. I was born in El Salvador, and I came here when I was 6 years old, but I went to Armstead Gardens Elementary Middle School, and then I went to Poly. So it's a pleasure to be with you guys here today.
Great, thank you. And for the first question, we will go to the Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City. We have Leah Stearns.
All right. The question I would like to propose to you is, please share your understanding of the current priorities and operations of Baltimore City Public Schools, including the Blueprint for Success, if you're familiar with it.
Yeah, so I was able to take a look at it, and it seems like there has been a lot of different versions of it, and I love that there is community input, that it includes also the board's priorities. It feels like we're really capturing what the needs are, and I love that there's the childhood education. I feel like it does start in the beginning, and also getting high quality teachers that really care about students really does change the atmosphere for students to want to learn. So I don't know a whole lot, but I really do like what I see so far.
Thank you.
Brianna.
Good afternoon. Please share how you see the role of the CEO and the role of the school board. How do they differ? How do they overlap? And how do they interact?
Yes, great question. I see the CEO doing more of like the daily operations and just making sure that, we're hitting the benchmarks. I see the school board being more as a committee that, we get to interact with parents and also students, and we could do internal audits and external audits, and we kind of work together to make sure that we kind of hold each other accountable. But I see the board being more of like the vision, like looking at the vision, and then the CEO is more of the person that can deliver those responsibilities. Yeah. Thanks.
Jocelyn?
Hi, good afternoon. Jocelyn Providence from the Baltimore Teachers Union. So part of the role of being a member of the Board of School Commissioners is to negotiate with the employees' unions. What do you know about any current issues or dynamics of school boards and unions that represent city schools employees? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a teacher, so I'm not a part of that world, but I have seen amazing teachers like Franca and also Z Cohen just like be a part of that world, and what they tried to uplift. I know that one of the issues that was talked about was just bringing living wages, and I believe that was passed. So I will look forward to just hearing what the teachers unions has to say, and just supporting you, and you guys are doing the work, and you guys know what the needs are more than probably any of us. So, I look forward to working with them.
Tasha?
Share, what role do you think the school board plays in ensuring schools are safe and all the districts, students, employees, and families feel welcomed and secure in our schools?
Yeah, that is a great question. I feel like part of it is making sure that schools feel like a safe space. I feel like a lot of students, for one, whether it be just like safety against violence, they don't feel safe, or for a lot of immigrants like myself, it usually means just not seeing a lot of representation when we see teacher, like just on teacher and administrative roles. So I think if we I think one of our priorities should be making sure that we are providing a safe space for students to feel welcome to learn and want to go to school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Roger?
Hey there. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Roger Schulman with the Fund for Educational Excellence. The budget for the school system is roughly around $1.6, $1.7 million. Can you talk about any experiences you've had managing budgets, sort of what your role was in that budget, and sort of like the size and scale of the budget you oversaw?
Yeah, so I work for the Deutsche Foundation, and we have to use 5% of our investment fund. So for us, it's 5 million. So that's the budget that we're kind of dealing with year to year. I don't oversee it. We have a committee, we have a board that, tells us what the number is. One of the challenges that we experience sometimes is making sure that we don't overspend in the beginning of the year, or, don't wait until like the end of the year to disperse funds. So that's my capacity in handling our budget. So just making sure, just more in the administrative side, and making sure that everything is put correctly.
Kenzie?
What role do you see charter schools play in the city school portfolio?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of advantages and, challenges when it comes to charter schools. One of the things that I appreciate is that, not every student is the same and learns the same. So having a school that, is more on the innovative side is very refreshing. And also I love that there's like community focus to it. And like the small classrooms, I know that, I benefit a lot from small classrooms. I know that some of the challenges are that sometimes they don't perform at level, and that we also have to use, the city has to use, their money to support them. But I think that it is kind of an exchange relationship, right? So like we provide the funding, but also, from my understanding is that we also like oversee charter schools. So I feel like that it's just this relationship that we have to have, that we were both benefiting from. So I think it could be better, but it's just, it is what we have to give to receive something. So yeah.
Jason?
Sure. Thank you again for joining us. Please describe the role you think families and communities should play in the decision-making at the district level.
Yeah, I think that they have such a high role. I think we should be talking to them more. I know this is an open to anyone, and I think we can do a better job of making sure that families feel more included. A lot of the work that I've been a part of is, I work with Baltimore's Promise. I was a youth grant maker, and we allocated $500,000 to 10 organizations that work with young people. And, I honestly wouldn't have been a part of that work if Baltimore's Promise didn't decide to be innovative and give young people $500,000. So, and I think we did amazing work with that. So I think making sure that we include people that we typically don't include into the conversation is so important, because we can gain so much insight. And I want to talk to parents, I want to talk to students, and I really want to understand what the issues are, what they think the issues are. And so I do think that they're very important and essential to the work that we do.
Charles?
Thank you. Following up on Jason's question, many times the school system may not align, the goals and the objectives of the school system may not align with the goals and objectives of the parents or the communities that they represent, they serve. How would you go about trying to bring them into alignment?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the goal, right? The reason why we're all here is because we really care about young people and the outcomes, right? So I think just understanding that there is a common ground, that, we are coming to it with good intentions is the first step, but also it's just like transparency. Like, a student or a parent might not know why we made a choice, but if we really we walk them through the process, not in a condescending way, but like if we walk them through the process of like how we got here, show them the data, then maybe they might understand our side, but also like active listening and making sure that they feel like they are being listened to. And then, finding a way to compromise and include something that, that they care about. Or I know that, I worked with 14 other young people, and sometimes it was really hard to make choices. And but we all kind of gave something and we received something that we like. So at the end of the day, we all kind of walked away feeling happy about creating some sort of change.
Thank you.
Dr. Brooks?
Yes. So, good afternoon. What was the hardest decision impacting youth that you've had to make? Describe how you made that decision and the result of that decision.
So I'm going to go back to my work with Baltimore's Promise. So we were picking the next cohort, and we have received so many wonderful candidates, but we had like a week to interview all of these candidates. So we had to, some of the group they wanted to just pick 20 and just go with the 20 that had the highest scores. And a lot of us wanted to make sure that everyone had a chance to be interviewed. So, I mean, to me, it was not a hard, choice. I would, we wanted to make sure that everyone has an opportunity, but we really had to fight for it, right? And we were able to interview all of the candidates that we thought would be, that would qualify. and would be really good candidates. So I'm really proud with that decision of like making sure that I stuck with what I believed, and I thought it was worth it towards the end.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll start back for another round. Back with you, Leah.
All right. So, how would you advocate for young people or parents who believe that the school board doesn't listen to them?
Yeah, I would want to understand why they feel like they're not being listened to. Like, are they talking to people and that's not the route that's working for them? And just like making sure that, I think first of all, it's important that we share the resources that are available. And if not, then making sure that we're connecting them to the right person. I mean, this is Baltimore after all, it's Baltimore. We know someone that can actually help someone with something. So I feel like that's the way that I would advocate. I mean, it's just literally, I mean, it's doing an extra step, but I feel like it is so worth it to make sure that someone feels like they're being heard and that they're connected to someone that they need to talk to. So thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Brianna.
Tell us why you believe you would be a good school commissioner, and also, being an immigrant yourself, I'd love to hear a little bit about your perspective on how the district can better support our growing English language learner population.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's why I want to join. I feel like my identity as an immigrant really has shaped my interactions with the world and all the systems that are in place. So for me, it's important, or the reason why I would like to be a commissioner is because I want to make sure that I break barriers for people that have similar backgrounds as myself. I have a sister that just graduated from City, and a lot of things were a lot easier for her, but she was still having the same problems that my peers were having. She was having problems with FAFSA, and literally it's the same issues that my classmates were having my year. And, it takes a lot of grit for someone to, go to courage really to go to a counselor and be like, this is the situation that is happening. And how do you help me, right? And, she spent like over 8 months trying to figure out this FAFSA situation. And, she was very lucky that she had adults that like cared and wanted to help her. But not everyone has that, right? Like not everyone has an adult that advocates for them. So making sure that we break the barrier systemically right now, like right here, is very important to me. I think one of the other things that one of my experiences is I feel like we do such a good job in middle school and elementary school of having parents be involved in the process. And I feel like part of the reason why that happens is because we have administration now that, looks like our people, right? Like Armstead Gardens, when I was growing up, none of the teachers, none of the administration spoke Spanish. And now that's so different, right? We have a lot of people that speak Spanish, but we don't have that in a high school level. And it's so important that we have that, right? Because these are like the most important years. For me, I did not understand why it was important to test high on the SAT. I didn't know why, I went to poly, so, A course and B course is like everything, and I didn't understand the differences. It wasn't until I went to a program called Adelante Latina, which is the program that preps Latinas for college, that I was finally comfortable to ask questions, and I didn't feel embarrassed about what I was asking. So all that to say is just, there's just, as an immigrant, there's just a lot of things you don't know, and sometimes you just find out a little too late. And so for me, it is important to make sure that somehow we figure out how to communicate that and get parents involved. I think that they are part of the puzzle. And once they understand what's happening, I know that they're going to care about their student success.
Jocelyn.
Thank you, Jocelyn Providence, Baltimore Teachers Union. So part of the role of being a commissioner on the school board is to hold the CEO accountable. On what topics would you say that the district CEO needs to be held accountable, or how do you think that the CEO should be evaluated? What components of the CEO's job should be assessed when thinking about the effectiveness and what can be improved? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I believe, the blueprint is really our guiding star. And I think that's how we hold her accountable, making sure that, we're raising test scores, that graduation rates are higher. I also love the idea that there is more of an emphasis of like making sure that we prepare students after high school, either, higher education or workforce development, just something that gives them a livable wage. And so I think, I love the benchmarks that we have right now. I think they're so important and we're really like going in the right direction. And the way that we would hold the CEO accountable is just having an annual check-in, just the way that everyone kind of does. And then also just like a midway check-ins, just to make sure that like we're kind of on the same page. Like sometimes, you are so busy doing your job that you kind of forget the little details or like the main goal. And it's important to remember why we're doing this work.
What role do you think systemic racism has played in the school system in Baltimore? And how should district leaders address its legacy?
Yeah. For a while, I something that I couldn't understand is that, you drive on one street and it's full of trash, uneven like pavement, and then the next street over, it's like the most beautiful houses you've ever seen, and there's like trees, and then someone was like, it's red lining, and I'm like, oh, okay. And I think, it's insane how a zip code really can change your outcomes in life and the resources that you have available to you, right? Like there's community or neighborhoods that have food insecurity, and then there are neighborhoods where they're learning algebra very early on. So I feel like that's how you know systemic racism kind of seeps in. It's doing a really good job at it. And I think the way that we address it is by being data driven, making sure that we are putting more resources where at the communities that need it the most. And I know that there is kind of like a problem where, we're giving, we're putting resources, but the people that need it the most aren't always the ones that are having access to that. So making sure that we figure out why that's happening, and just making sure that, we really are helping the most vulnerable populations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Carter.
Sorry, I'm having trouble with the mute button. You spoke a little bit about your experience with the youth grant makers and the tough decisions you had to make. And you also spoke about that when you were talking about how to engage stakeholders. Can you talk about a little bit about how feedback from your stakeholders in that process may have changed a decision you would have made without their input? Whether you were going to approve a grant that then you got stakeholder feedback and you didn't, or however stakeholders changed your opinion on something. Sorry, that was long-winded.
No, that's a great question. I mean, what was so great about this is that youth really led this thing, and we really did not have like anyone telling us no when it came to making choices. But we did have a funder that was funding this money, and they did have their own timeline, right? And that was very difficult because there were times where we it was like 14 of us, and the youngest ones were like 16 years old, and they're like, what is happening, right? So there was a lot of catching up to do, and so making sure that we were on timeline was very difficult. But there was so much love and passion for this project that all of us kind of stepped forward and made sure that we read the proposals correctly, that we made sure that we felt very happy with our choice. But that was a very difficult week for us.
Mackenzie.
The Board of School Commissioners will be negotiating a contract for a new CEO in the next year or several years for city schools. Please provide your perspective on what factors should be used to evaluate the contract.
Yeah, I think making sure that making sure that equity is a part of that. I think that's like one of the most important values that we should strive for, and making sure that you know, sorry, that is a really good question. Making sure that, you know, our values are aligned still, making sure that we, you know, are hitting our benchmarks is very important. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say to that.
Jason?
So how would you advocate for young people or parents who believe the school board just doesn't listen to them?
Yeah, I think again, it's really all about active listening, making sure that, you know, at the end of the day, we can all agree that, you know, we really want what's best for our students. So making sure that, you know, we can just kind of find a middle ground and work towards achieving that.
Charles?
Okay, so looking at the school system overall for the entire city, on a grade scale from A to F, what grade would you give the school system currently, and why would you give it that grade?
I would give it a B-. I feel like compared to my experience when I was growing up and seeing my sister grow up, I feel like there's been an effort, right, of making sure that there are more resources available. With that being said, I feel like, you know, it's just not the school system. It's not just on the school system. It's also on the parents. It's on, you know, our transportation system, because that's how students get to school, right? So there's just a lot of pieces that are outside of our control. But I think that there is so much love for what people, you know, for students. And I feel like just with a little bit more time, we will really get there. And we're also doing a lot more work, it feels like, with data driven. And yeah, so I really do think we're going to get there.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And Dr. Brooks, you have a final question?
I do. Thank you. What role do you think school choice plays in the city schools portfolio? How do you understand the city schools school choice program?
Yeah, I mean, I benefited from that, right? So I live in Armstead Gardens, so my school would have been Patterson, and there's nothing wrong with Patterson, but Poly was perfect for me in the way that it challenged me and it set me up to be a good student in college. So I'm all for it. I will say that, you know, going back to the immigrant perspective, is that I don't think it's that inclusive to non-English speakers. Sometimes, you know, it takes a minute for someone to learn English. And so their composite score doesn't really reflect their intelligence level at all. And also there are schools that require test placement. And, you know, there aren't tests that are in Spanish. And, you know, we really are leaving a community behind by not being inclusive to that population. And I mean, the other part is a lot of immigrant parents don't understand what it is and don't take advantage of it at all. I've heard many stories where students wanted to go to Poly or City or Western, and their parents was like, it's too far, you can't go. And then, you know, a teacher intervened and helped the situation, but not all teachers are going to help and intervene. So I think just creating more awareness, because the immigrant population is growing, and we really, you know, we can't ignore it. We can't push it to the side. We should, you know, really make sure that we create a plan that's very inclusive, that creates awareness around the issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cecilia. So just as we're closing out, do you have any final words or anything that that you wanted to ensure the community panel heard from you as we're closing out the interview?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for having me here today. I know that I don't have a lot of experience when it comes in the educational, but I do have a lot of energy and I really do love the city, and being a part of this work makes me feel so, like, it makes me feel more connected to it. And it feels like I'm putting, what is it, like my own history, my own roots here. And, you know, I'm really looking forward to seeing what the city does. And I think we're in a really good spot. So thank you again for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. We have our next interviewee that is here. And so I will give her a moment to join and come on camera. The interview will be with April Christina Curley.
Hi, I'm here.
Great. So my name is Ari Giles. We're facilitating this interview today. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go through and just introduce you to the panelists. This is the panel that will be selecting names of candidates for the mayor's review and consideration for appointment to Board of School Commissioners. And so I'll go through their names, just a couple of things so you know. We've been making through about 2 rounds of interviews with 2 rounds of questions with everyone, depending on the length. So just be you know, concise but thorough in your responses, and we should be able to make it through. Just wanted you to know this is an open meeting, so it will be recorded and it's accessible to community members, just like if it was a public meeting. So let's make sure you knew that. And so I'll just go through the panelists now. We have from ACLU, Frank Paxanella. From Associated Student Congress in Baltimore City, we have Leah Stearns. From the Baltimore Family Alliance, we have Brianna Kaufman. From the Baltimore Teachers Union, we have Jocelyn Providence. I think Jocelyn will be switching out one of these moments to another member from the Baltimore Teachers Union. I believe now is the time. I'm not sure. I think Diamante Brown may be joining in.
I think President Brown's going to join in right after this interview. So I'm going to stay here for this part.
Great.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for clarifying. Disability Rights Maryland, we have Tasha Marshall. From Fund for Educational Excellence, we have Roger Schulman. From the Maryland Alliance of Public Charter Schools, we have Mackenzie Allen. From Parent and Community Advisory Board, Jason Green. From PTA Council of Baltimore City, we have Charles Smith. And from the mayor's, representing the mayor's office, we have Dr. Deborah Brooks, who's the Executive Director, Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. So April Christina Curley, if you could introduce yourself, and then I'll go to the panelists and we'll start the interview.
Certainly. Well, first of all, happy Pride. Happy almost Juneteenth. And thank you all for having me. My name is April Christina Curley. And honestly, I'm very humbled to be interviewing with you all today for such an important role. It feels serendipitous because this was something that I pursued as a candidate in the first Board of School Commissioners election in 2022. And since then, I've remained enthusiastic about serving the young people of Baltimore in whatever capacity possible. So this is a really big moment. And I'm just really grateful for the opportunity. And so hopefully I can impress you all today. And I'm ready to start wherever you all are.
Great. So you have the first question, Leah.
All right. The first question I want to propose for this interview is, please share your understanding of the current priorities and operations of Baltimore City Public Schools. Include the blueprint for access, if you're familiar with it.
Certainly. So I am, I think, very familiar with the blueprint for Maryland's future. I know that it was key legislation passed in 2021. I know that this legislation is in a lot of ways working towards the undoing of historical underfunding across our district, particularly having a negative impact on students from low-income communities, English, or multilingual language learners, as well as students with disabilities. And the 5, pillars that exist are, I think, at front and center of how we are thinking about implementation of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future: early childhood education, career and college readiness, qualified and diverse teachers, more resources for students, and better governance and accountability. And the reality is Baltimore City had a blueprint before the blueprint, because that's who we are, we're leaders. And I know that that version really already aligns well with Maryland's blueprint. And I know that there are really 3 components of the city's school blueprint for success, including student wholeness, literacy, and staff leadership. And so given those, I think, pretty hefty pillars and areas of focus, I know that we are also working towards very ambitious goals, including increasing proficiency percent for MCAP in both ELA literacy and math, increasing the graduation rate, and increasing the student wholeness composite score. And I am very much excited to think about how those pieces exist in the policy realm on the side of the board, and the implementation side of it on the side of the CEO and her office. And so I think I could get a little deeper, but I know that this is a short interview, so I'll pause there.
Thank you.
Brianna?
Good evening. Can you please share how you see the role of the CEO and the role of the school board? How do they differ? How do they overlap? And how do they interact?
Thank you. So I was a high school social studies teacher at Vivian T. Thomas Medical Arts Academy, go 429. And I taught American government. And so I really understand this through the lens of sort of that structure, whereas I know the board's role really is governance, it's policy, it's budgeting, it's setting the mission, the vision, the trajectory of the district, and having measures in place through committees, through checks and balances such as internal audits, to really lay out what it is we want to see in terms of the policy creation. And the CEO is responsible and charged with the execution of that, with the implementation of that, with the forward progress of that. And together, really, these entities work nicely, but there is, I think, a very healthy separation of powers. And I think the missing piece to that, if my analogy is still somewhat of a 3-branch structure, I think the community and parent pieces make up that 3rd component of accountability in terms of the checks and balances and the separation of powers. And so, yeah, the board's role is very much to do things such as hire and evaluate the CEO, approve the budget, adopt legislative, I think a legislative agenda for the General Assembly, all sorts of fun things that really, I think, set the structure at a macro level for the district to really then use in the CEO's office to implement those pieces. And lots more I can share, but I'll stop there.
Jocelyn?
Hi, Jocelyn Providence, Baltimore Teachers Union. So part of the role of the School Board of Commissioners is also to negotiate with employees' unions. What do you know about current issues or dynamics of the school board and unions that they represent for city schools employees? Thank you.
So I will say a few things. First, when I was teaching, I was a member of the Baltimore Teachers Union. It was very important for me to be pro-union in a way that allowed for the needs and the voices, the collective voices of teachers, paraeducators, staff, to, put forth what it means for them to be successful in their roles. And I appreciated my time and what I learned in that time of my life as a union member. I also marched on Annapolis with AFSCME at that time, and just really, I think, learned in real time what it means to be very thoughtful about all of the ways that the humans that make up this system are supported and professionally developed, and really just a holistic picture of what it means to capture the voices of those who are in unions, who are unionized. And so as it pertains to how unions, how our union entities, I'm going to say like BTU, AFSCME, AFL-CIO, and how that works alongside the board, I think it is really, I think, pretty structured, whereas the negotiations that happen are, I think, mostly managed by the CEO, and at some point the board then has a chance to have a say in the final approval of any negotiation of contracts. And I think that together, this structure allows for, as I said, the needs of our teachers, our paraeducators, and our staff to feel like they have an ability to show up and contribute thoughtfully to, the ecosystem and the system that we have to operate from within in ways that we are forced to be collaborative. I'm very much broad in this question, so feel free to drill down in that if there's any other follow-up, Jocelyn, because I might not be hitting the mark, but yeah.
That's okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Tasha?
How familiar are you with the rights of students with disabilities?
So I am very familiar. Again, as a former teacher, there were amazing educators and staff members, a support team in place to support me as the teacher in the needs that I had with students with disabilities. I've had two nephews. I do have two nephews who are autistic, excuse me, who I've helped my sister, who's a single mom, navigate the pathways into support for students with disabilities. And I know that in Maryland, really what it boils down to is that the law requires that students receive free, appropriate public education that assists them to make it past the finish line and prepare for employment. And I know that this looks different across the board. Students with disabilities look different across the board, but really it is a legal measure that requires everyone in the education system across the state of Maryland to have accommodations in place, whether that's like the individualized family services plan or an IEP, a 504. And I do know that I feel there have been some challenges perhaps with thinking about how the blueprint really sort of supports the needs of students with disabilities. I know that there is an amazing concerted effort to increase funding for students with disabilities, because in the past, there have been inequities and underfunding that have impacted students with disabilities more harshly than other students in some cases. And so I think as we are looking at the implementation of the blueprint and thinking about the actual funding needed, I think that there are discussions around challenges about how to perhaps better serve students with disabilities through a strengthened budget. And so if as an appointed commissioner, I would very much be interested in how the policy around that budget allocation in particular could work to serve our students with disabilities better. I think in Baltimore, it's about 14% of our kids identify as a student with a disability.
Thank you.
Roger?
Hi, I'm Roger Schulman with the Fund for Educational Excellence. Thanks for being here. The school system has a budget that's somewhere around $1.6, $1.7 billion. And part of the role of the board is to approve that budget and provide oversight over it. Can you share a little bit about any experiences you have overseeing budgets? What specifically was your role and sort of the size and scope of the budget you oversaw?
Sure. So I know you all have had a chance to review my application materials, and my resume, I think, does a pretty good job of sort of detailing some of these pieces, but I'll highlight my time at Google. Excuse me. So my role at Google for 6 years was to build a program from the ground up and scale that program nationally to create equitable pathways for historically ignored and excluded groups, and get them into technical roles at Google. Technical roles at Google are very lucrative roles. And so what I was charged with doing was creating pipeline essentially for historically Black college and university students to tap into all of the amazing opportunities that exist at a company like Google. That program was a multi-million-dollar program. It started off very small in year one when I started in 2014. And by 2020, when I had left, that program had grown from 5 schools to, I want to say, over 15 schools. There was a budget increase year over year because of the success of that program. And the managing of that budget was actually myself. And the pieces that I think are important to highlight would be that this was a national program, and for the first time in my career, I had the opportunity to learn in real time what it meant to scale a program to a macro level, using a very tight budget, and being able to still drive success to create more investment in the future. And in managing a multi-million-dollar budget, there were, I think, easier costs and expenses that made allocating an easier process. And then there were things that I think I struggled to understand or really accept the trade-offs or the opportunity costs. An example of that would be like this program that I managed required engineers to take off time in their full-time engineering role and serve as a rotational instructor. And managing all of their living expenses and all of their programmatic expenses was sort of easy. But thinking about the trade-off being an internship prep program for students coming into Google for the first time, and knowing that that program was important and that I needed to maybe have money enough to support that program, but understanding the trade-off of that decision, I think I learned how to navigate and make really sound decisions given the limited budget that we had, and work really hard to get folks invested to see the promise of the program I was running so that we could get more money year after year after year. And so I have experience doing that. I would love to get more experience doing that. And I'm really proud of the partnerships that I was able to bring in terms of budget with regard to the schools that I built relationships with. I will highlight building a $1 million partnership with Morgan State University from Google. That was all me. And I think my 15, 16-year career has given me an opportunity to learn how to manage really big budgets, but I will admit that there's always room for growth, and I still have a whole lot more. And managing a $1 billion budget is very different than managing a multi-million-dollar budget. So,
Mackenzie?
What role do you see charter schools play in the city schools portfolio?
So I think as someone who is a sort of a proponent, if you will, of alternative pathways in the education space for students. I think that charter schools absolutely provide that very thing, right? An alternative opportunity to pursue something specific that a charter school might offer that a public school does not. I think this question in my mind sort of also makes me think about school choice as a whole, because I think that with the system that we have in place, I talk about this often outside of Baltimore and outside of Maryland. I always try to get people to come spend their dollars in Baltimore because I'm really proud of it. And one of the things that I say is I think in theory and ideally, we have an amazing system set up for students who have a desire to pursue something very specific post high school. And so if students are interested in a healthcare pathway and a tech pathway and a traditional arts pathway, we have something for them. We have a system and a structure in place that allows them to be interested and potentially foster that interest at the school of their choice. However, the implementation of that is, I think, where it gets complicated, because to stack rank students, I think it eventually creates, I think, a very, I'd say a very harmful impact for students who may not actually get their first, second, third choice of school, charter schools included in that. And I feel that the best way that I've been able to think about my position on school choice, if I'm being honest, is to hear what our young people are saying about it. I read a very well-written opinion piece by a junior, Jayzane Blessed at Patterson, on her thoughts about school choice. She's the diversity chair of the Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City. And her opinion was that it is more harmful to have a stacked rank approach than not. And I think our young people have said through our youth leadership channels that school choice should be reconsidered and reevaluated. And so at charter schools, as a part of this larger system, for me, what it boils down to and what I'm trying to communicate is that each and every one of our kids deserves an excellent education. And whether they are interested in CTE and they go to Digital Harbor, they should receive a phenomenal education that's going to set them up for success to be productive in their next step post-graduation. Whether they want to go to BSA, whether they want to, right, any school that our students land in really should be a school that provides them with a quality and excellent education. And I'm hopeful that we'll arrive at a place where that can be the case, whether a student goes down the street to their neighborhood, to the school that's closest to them in their neighborhood, and that is their first choice, or to the Baltimore Leadership School for Young Women because they want to improve on or build their leadership skills. I really think we have a system that could work even better, but I'm proud of what we have so far.
Jason?
Please describe the role you think families and community should play in decision-making on the district level.
Mm-hmm. So as I'll say a few things. One, the way that I like to think about this is the seats that we're in, the seats that you all are in, the seats that elected officials and appointed officials are in, those seats belong to the people. And I like to channel that sentiment because at the end of the day, I am accountable to the people in the community who I am serving. And so I think it goes without saying that this ecosystem is absolutely one that each piece is critical to the development of sound, inclusive, really progressive strategies and policies that we can then work on the CEO side to implement. And so families and communities, there are community organizations that do excellent work in thinking about our young people and their voices and their opinions matter. Our parents, our guardians, when I was teaching, were my favorite part of teaching. My students were my favorite part of teaching, but the parents and the community members that were invested and cared so much about the future of their students meant a lot to me, because I think that sometimes there's this sentiment that parents either don't care or don't have the time to care, and that just is not true, particularly in Baltimore City. And so there's a huge value add to making sure that the board creates as many opportunities as possible to engage with parents and community members. And I know that the board does that already very well. I know that there are multiple channels that the board uses or leverages to get the word out and to really engage and get the input from parents and community members. And so the answer there is that we cannot do the work without this critical component and arm of the ecosystem, which are parents, guardians, and extended family and community members that all work to make sure that our young people are safe and secure and empowered to really go forth and conquer the dreams that they have for themselves.
Quick time check. We got about 7 minutes left. So next will be Charles.
Good evening. It is evening now. Oftentimes, where the school administration, the board is guiding us may not be in alignment with where community parents want the school system to go. How would you work on realigning those two different perspectives?
Charles, can you say the two competing interests or parties that you said that?
Again, so many times the school system itself, the board, the school board, the administration may not be going in the same direction that parents and communities would like them to go in. How would you get those two to come together?
Yeah, I think an example in real time might be helpful. So during my campaign, I campaigned on a few, I think, pillars that were very much from what our young people had been saying, and just, trying to listen and keep my ear to the ground on what our youth leaders are saying. And I think what I learned, because one of my stances was, to keep cops out of classrooms. And the more I talked to parents and community members, it was very clear to me that my stance was not really one that they were wanting to accept, because they were fearful about the safety of their kids. And I had to really understand that perspective and make sure that that was something that I used to think about how to bridge the gap for what our young people are saying, which is that they don't actually feel that there's a need to have police officers in their classrooms necessarily. And so in trying to, I think, align both of these maybe competing priorities or sentiments or realities for that matter, meant bringing all parties to the conversation and reassessing what really is underneath these things that we're trying to bring to the surface to create really thoughtful solutions around. And I don't know that I was able to do that as much as I would have liked, but I think in the grand scheme and how this sort of translates into what a potential commissioner appointment might look like, it's really understanding all of the competing priorities and the depth to which those things impact each of us and in our young people in particular, and then reassessing what makes the strongest collaborative strategy to be better aligned on what the various stakeholders and parties need and want to see. I think at the core of it all, we do share the overall vision and mission that the board has set forth, which is to make sure that all of our students are provided a quality education that focuses on their whole development. And I think the buy-in is there from community members, from parents, from the board, from the CEO. And I think centering our young people in between those things is always a good place for us to ground ourselves when we're thinking about how we on these sides of the aisle sort of have thoughts about what we want, but making sure that we're actually listening to our teachers, our staff, our paraeducators, our youth to determine what is the best path forward according to them.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Dr. Brooks.
Thank you. So I've heard you talk a great deal about you being a former high school teacher, as well as working with young people in higher ed. So what was the hardest decision impacting youth that you've had to make? Describe how you made that decision and the results of that decision.
So this is a sort of something that I talk about often because I think about it often, and that the answer to that question is leaving the classroom after 2 years. I was, I think my students, y'all send me a Zoom message or me a Facebook message if you disagree, but I think my students had a great experience with me as their teacher. I was a great teacher. My principal would come into the classroom. My kids were quiet and just writing, right? And engaged. And I think because I loved my kids so much and because I identify with so many of them and how I grew up, there was a different kind of impact I was able to make on them. And I felt after my second year that I wasn't making enough of an impact. I felt limited in what I was able to do. And so that prompted me to make one of the hardest decisions in my life, which was to leave teaching to move into a role that allowed me to focus on a more macro level solution, which in my mind was to find brilliant Black and Brown leaders at the undergraduate level and recruit them and get them invested in the potential of changing the lives of students in the highest need areas. And I did that very well. I was able to bring over 300 Black and Brown teachers from HBCUs and HSIs and place them in high need classrooms across the country, including Baltimore, and know that the folks who I brought in were going to love students the way that I love students, and brought in folks who could identify with students in the way that I identify with students. And so that trade-off for me was made, I felt confident and comfortable in that because I knew that thousands of students have been impacted because of the amazing humans that I was able to put in front of them in my time as a recruiter at Teach for America. I will say, I think about going back to the classroom every day. I miss it. It was the hardest job. It was the most fulfilling job I've ever had. But moving into my role at Teach for America taught me a whole lot of things about program management at a large scale. And then obviously going into my time at Google and being able to impact thousands of students through economic empowerment, I think has been sort of the win as a result of me leaving my classroom. I still keep in contact with my kids and their families, and they're no longer, I'm sorry, they are young. They are adults, full-grown adults. One of my students is a PhD now. And so I definitely, at the time, really struggled with that decision because I knew the very tangible impact it was going to have on my kids, on my colleagues, on the leadership. I knew all of that, and still I felt like I needed to do more. And that was sort of the decision that I had to make in real time.
Thank you.
So we made it through one full round. I want to say for the community panel, if you have a burning question that you feel like was not addressed or something that you want to clarify or follow up on, I want to give you the opportunity to do that now. So you can hop in the chat or just ping me, and I can circle back to specific community panel members if you have specific questions that you wanted to follow up with, or another question you wanted to pose. Probably have time for another one. Okay, there was one suggestion in the chat. A question that's been asked is, what was your overall grade for the school system, and why do you get that grade?
So I think this question is can be answered twofold. In terms of the system, I'm going to give the system an A, and here's why. The system, when we say the system, we mean us, right? We mean the humans who make up the system, the ecosystem. We mean the board members, we mean the CEO, we mean the staff, we mean community members and parents, we mean everybody. And so in my experiences, the people here want to get it right. The people here are trying, the people here are working hard. We want to make sure that our young people are taken care of. And so the system gets an A because we're trying. The performance of the system gets an F because we know we have so many things that we need to gain in order to make sure that our students are set up for success, which is why I appreciate these ambitious goals that we have in place in terms of proficiency, graduation, wholeness, and wellness. And so I believe we can separate the two because I don't want to conflate, right? The humans, the folks who are actually on the ground, really working hard day in and day out to get the job done, and the performance, and those two things should reflect, right, the work being put in and the progress and success thereof. But I don't want us to dismiss or diminish the excellence happening across the system, because there's a lot of that too. So I don't know if you accept that answer, but I would say that the system is going to get an A because we have a lot of people out here really, really doing excellent work with excellent skill sets and excellent experiences. And then the performance of our system needs a lot of work. So I'm going to give us maybe a D.
Great. And just any final words as we're closing out, and anything you wanted to make sure you cover.
From me,
Yes.
I just say thank you again for this opportunity. If this isn't the path forward for me, I'm still looking for all ways to support the folks who are on the ground in the classrooms and living this day to day. And so I'm just excited. I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and get to work and pour into an appointed seat with as much fervor and passion as I can muster, which is a lot. And so, yeah, I appreciate this moment, this opportunity, and I will keep my eyes open for further correspondence or whatever is next, the next step in this process, should there be a next step.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all. Bye.
Okay. We're running a few minutes behind. Still been trying to track that and make sure we're giving everyone their full 30 minutes for their interview. So I've been trying to manage and monitor that as we're going through. Our next candidate will be Dr. Jaquin Caston. So if you're here, I think I just saw you join, sir. I will give you a moment to come on camera as I'm just talking you through the kind of introductory remarks. I'm Ari Giles, facilitating this interview this evening. You're joined by a community panel. The community panel is tasked with developing a list of candidates for the mayor to review and consider for appointment to a nomination to the appointed seats on the Board of School Commissioners. And this panel is performing that process. And so I'll go through quickly who we're joined by today, and we'll go through each one. We'll have opportunity to ask questions after you introduce yourself. So I'll just go through that list of attendees now. Frank Patinella did have to leave us, but he will be reviewing the recording of this. I also did want to note this is an open meeting, it's recorded, and it's open to the public to join. We have Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City. We have Leah Stearns here with us. We also have Brianna Kaufman from the Baltimore Family Alliance. From the Baltimore Teachers Union, we're joined by Diamante Brown. This evening, we have Disability Brights Maryland, who's represented by Tasha Marshall. We have Roger Schulman from the Fund for Educational Excellence, Mackenzie Allen from the Maryland Alliance of Public Charter Schools. We have Jason Green from the Parent Community Advisory Board, Charles Smith from the PTA Council of Baltimore City, and representing the Mayor's Office, we have Dr. Deborah Brooks, Executive Director, Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. So I'll give you opportunity now, Jaquin, if you're here to briefly introduce yourself, and then we'll go through questions.
So again, my name is Jaquin Caston. I'm really excited to be here on tonight. I've been an educator now for about 23 years. Just really quickly, in regards to the things that I've done in regards to education, started off as a student myself in an urban area back in Richmond, Virginia, where I hail from. From a student to a paraprofessional, from a paraprofessional to a Spanish teacher, from a Spanish teacher to a reading specialist. I was a reading specialist for about 4 years in Richmond, Virginia. From there, I transitioned over into an assistant principal within the public school sector. And for the past 8 years, I've been a principal in correctional education. So really taking a look or transitioning rather into adult education here in the state of Maryland. I am, a proud citizen of Baltimore, Maryland, and I really do love Baltimore. I really love Baltimore City Public Schools because I've been able to do the things and I've been able to compete with teachers and educators around the world because of the foundation that I was given in Baltimore City and by the chance that I've been given when no other cities in many places around the world would not accept me. Baltimore City took a chance with me back in 2003 and allowed me to come here and to be a part of them. And the rest is history. What you see sitting before you now is a manifestation of what can happen within Baltimore City Public School systems. Thank you.
For the first question, we'll go to you, Leah.
Hello. The first question that I have to propose to you for today is tell us about the time that you were charged for forging partnerships and building a coalition to achieve goals. Please note the type of partners who were engaged.
Sure. So currently, I'm the Maryland State Advocate for Adult Basic Education. So really trying to forge relationships and partnerships with legislation, with people within the community in order to bring an awareness to adult basic education. So we're talking about school systems to help them to understand the importance of advocacy, associations, for example, the Coalition on Adult Basic Education. I'm also within my job as a principal, forging relationships with partners for men who are transitioning from prison to be able to find jobs. So making sure, for example, there's an occupational training component to the educational system that we have. So ensuring that people have jobs, just connecting with community resources such as places such as Vehicles for Change, which allow people to come and to work for them as they're transitioning from the prison system back to being on the streets. Also, partnerships. For example, now there's actually even a school in Richmond, Virginia that I work with, Swansboro Elementary School, with partnering with helping to build literacy through not literacy, I'm sorry, building fluency through readers theater. So working with these community partners in order to raise literacy with looking at the arts through that program, partnering with the reading specialists there, reaching out to different community members and just grassroots efforts to raise money and funding to even be able to feed the kids, to give them extrinsic motivation in order to want to be a part of the program in order to help them. So that's a very brief stint of what it is in regards to communities, being out in the communities, getting people, churches, people who are alumni associations as well to come and to be a part of building partnerships and networking in order to get that done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brianna.
Good evening. Can you share how you see the role of the CEO and the role of the school board? How do they differ? How do they overlap? And how do they interact?
I believe that the role of the CEO is really to move the district forward. From the research and listening to different presentations from the mayor's office, hearing that pretty much the school board is pretty much the governance. So you're not there to act as the one who's the driving force, but you're there to make sure that the direction that the superintendent has selected for the district to go in is really being supported, making sure that people are being held accountable for the portion that they play in regards to the roles that have been created for the CEO. So the CEO is pretty much is the head, is the leader, and all these ideas and other things trickle down from her to all of the parts of her cabinets and so forth. So it's really the board is really to check for accountability, to see what resources that we have available from looking at these plans and making sure that they all lined up, and making sure that the resources that are available to the CEO are provided, and that he or she is aware of what they are, and making sure that they're being allocated correctly. So I believe that the biggest board is that the head would be the executive. So she's the driving force. She's the one who's supposed to push it forward. And the board is sort of served as the governance for that machine that she's driving.
Diamante.
Hi, my name is Diamante Brown, not Diamante. I know my name is challenging to pronounce, so feel free to call me President Brown. My question for you is, part of the role of the Board of School Commissioners is to negotiate with the employees as unions. What do you know about the current issues and/or dynamics of the school board and unions that represent city schools employees? And some of those unions include the Baltimore Teachers Union, the principals, supervisors, administrators, union, I don't know the exact acronym, and the City Union of Baltimore, which covers our cafeteria supervisors, and also Local 44, which covers our bus drivers.
So I believe that what has to happen between the board and the union I believe is really to just to hear out any issues that they may have. Again, just trying to come to a common ground in order to ensure that the work that needs to be done can be done. Issues that are current with the board, again, along with the union, I really have to be honest with you. I really don't know of any of them specifically. But a lot of times, making sure that, a lot of times for me being a part of different teacher unions, understanding the issues that we had, making sure that we had the time to be able to get the job done, making sure that we're being compensated correctly, making sure that making sure that people are able to work to the letter of the contract, the signed agreement that the union has with the district. So if you're supposed to have duty-free lunch, ensuring that people have that. They're supposed to have duty-free planning or time to make sure that they can be within professional learning communities, ensuring that those type of things that are within these contracts are being met and to the letter, because we want to ensure that the verbiage and the wording of the contracts are actually being honored. That's the purpose of having them, is to ensure that we are working within the framework of them in order to ensure that the work is done and that the agreement between the two is actually being carried out.
Gotcha.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Ms. Marshall. No, I still can't hear you. Nope.
Well, yeah, we still can't hear you. We'll go back around and see if you can get back in on the next time around. Roger.
Right, or maybe put the question in the chat if you can't get it back. The budget for the school system is somewhere around $1.6, $1.7 billion. And part of the responsibility of the board is to approve the budget and to oversee the budget. Can you share a little bit about your experience working with budgets, what your role specifically has been, and sort of the size and scope of the budget you've worked with?
Well, I almost definitely have not worked with a budget of that size, but
I wouldn't have expected so. But.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, well, so I have to oversee a very small budget for the school in which I oversee. But again, those things are just small physical things, like ensuring that we have things in order to carry out the curriculum. So to make sure that we have books, to make sure that teachers have resources, to make sure that we have monies for the programs and things that we're supposed to be carrying out. But I do think, just to be real with you and to be honest, when it comes to numbers and finances like that with the board, I see that some of the qualifications was that someone would have to be sort of an expert in those areas. So, really leaning on them. But I do also know how to, with the budget, there's checks and balances. So when I make purchases, or when I decide to purchase things, I have to also make sure that I give an account for that and make sure that each month the things that I purchase, it meets with the things that were approved through requisitions, and making sure that they sort of coincide one with another. So making sure that things line up in regards to the expenditure. So I am aware that if you're saying that you're spending something, there are processes that have to be put into place. So for example, there's requisitions that have to be filled, then you have to get approvals through signatures, and then through those signatures, once the purchases are made, those receipts and those things for those expenditures then need to be given in order to be itemized, in order to be compared to what the statements are saying. But also, again, reading the verbiage of what the board is looking for, understanding that hopefully there was someone who is a little bit better versed in finance than myself, and I would stay in my lane and really look to them in regards to guidance in regards to that, and ensuring that and ensuring that that piece is being held with fidelity, so I am able to understand if the budget is that large, the things that are that should be able to be purchased with it and how it should be going with partners for human capital and those type of things. Just a very ambiguous overview of them. But again, in that area, I definitely would lean to the individual who is sort of the financial focused one and really listen to them and follow them for some type of guidance.
We'll go back to the question from Tasha at Disability Rights Maryland. How familiar are you with the legal rights of students with disabilities?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
How familiar are you with the legal rights of students with disabilities?
So the legal rights, are you talking about the IEP and all of those type of things? Well, when I was an assistant principal, I was also the chair of all of the IEP meetings. And even now within the correctional system, we know that once men turn 18, that they are by law still, the IEP still follows them up until the age of 22. So I have to really ensure that we are providing special education services even within the adult sector because they are protected by law. So I'm very aware of due process that has to go. I'm very aware even of, I believe, what I call the over processing and over putting people in special education. Something that's really amazing to me sitting in the seat that I sit in now. We see that most of those who are disabled are coming in with emotional disturbance as almost the number one reason as why many of them have IEPs, and it's seeming that that's stemming into a lot of them going into prison. So I do understand that. And I'm realizing that a lot of times there are misdiagnoses because it's not necessarily an emotional problem. It's a lack of vocabulary. It's the lack of the ability to socially, emotionally express oneself. So I do believe that, it's the lack of parents understanding what their rights and things are as well. So through that role as a principal and assistant principal, and even as a teacher, a classroom teacher who at times will have to recommend students for special education services, but also understanding that that's not the first thing that we go to. We have to make sure that we're trying interventions. We have to make sure that we're doing remediation. We have to make sure that we are involving the parents and asking, making sure that it's not, if it is a behavior issue before we even get to the IEP stage, to make sure that we are doing our best to ensure that we have exhausted all other avenues. So if we're looking at behaviors, we need to put in a behavior intervention plan, be able to come up with some positive behavior intervention strategies in order to try to curb those behaviors before we want to go and believe that it's simply just a disability. Because we may find from digging deeper that there are some other things that are happening, and these are the things in which we need to focus on in order to help those children to move forward. So I'm sort of, very understanding of also making sure that the institution that we are governing, or making sure that the institution that I am working for does not get sued by anyone, so ensuring that once those IEPs are created, that they are being implemented with fidelity, and we're trying to find the least restricted environments in order to provide this education to the students that we are overseeing. So if it's in the inclusion model, we're pushing students out. But if we find that they work best in small group, and self-contained, then understanding that we must work to the letter of that, because it is a legal breathing document that can also continue to change. And with that being said, I end on this: understand that it is a living document, and that just because it's been written is not written in stone, and it can always have a meeting call for us to begin to just look at the improvements and to hopefully begin to wean that child from those services once they begin with those support and with scaffolding, and they're able to sort of maintain on their own.
Mackenzie?
What role do you see charter schools play in the city schools portfolio?
I think charter schools help to give sort of those specialized that specialized interests for those who the neighborhood schools just aren't what they're looking for. So I think that they definitely benefit. I actually had the opportunity to work for one of them when I was in Baltimore City. Academy of College and Career Exploration, which really focused on either the college pathway or the career pathway, which a lot of times those were the students who decided that they wanted to focus on working on getting jobs or understanding the process in order to get in college. So it helped to provide them what they wouldn't have necessarily got from a school such as Frederick Douglass or Lombard or Lombard when I was there. So I think that they serve that purpose of giving that sort of that specialized or interest base for students who want to do something different. And I think it helps to give them choices. It helps to give them options, which I think is definitely awesome within a democratic society.
Jason.
Please describe the role. How you doing, brother? Please describe the role you think families and community should play in the decision-making at the district level.
Wow. So families and communities are, in my opinion, one of the heaviest hitters when it comes to the stakeholders, because the communities are what these students are going to go back to, and we're going to want them to be able to be, productive citizens. The families are definitely number one because we're there to serve their children. Their children are our clients. So we need to make sure that we're including them on the decision making, make sure that we're asking them their opinions and seeing what they think work best for them, because we need them as partners in this fight. I remember a pastor years ago used to always say that sheep beget sheep. It's not the pastor's job or the leader's job to go out and to get members. It's the sheep job to do that. So I feel the same way with families. If families are involved and if families feel that they're being heard, it's going to be families that's going to begin to speak up on behalf of the city school system. It's going to be families that's going to get them to understand the importance of school board meetings and being there and allowing their voices to be heard, to share their opinions, regardless of how big or how small, And I think that is the job of the board, to make sure that we make them feel as if we're listening to them, and also understanding, because and taking the good ideas into consideration. And when those ideas are taken into consideration, I think that it's awesome to even give credit where credit is due. That's something that my great grandfather used to always say. How much more things could we get done if we weren't worried about who was going to get the credit? So give credit where credit is due. When a family member or a parent or someone in the community give these great ideas, share that idea came from them, because then people will be more prone to not only come and show up, but they'll be prone to actually participate. So if I had to have a ranking, I honestly would put families and communities probably at number one, because we're serving the children of these communities and of these families. I want to be heard as a community member in the Northeast sector of Baltimore. I want the school board to understand what it is that I'm looking for. I want them to understand that I need these students to come out and be productive, because I need Social Security to still be in place when I decide to retire in a couple of years. So very important that we hear what they have to say, because these are the people who will be having to give jobs to these people who the city school system is actually educating. And we need to understand what skills are they noticing that our students are lacking, and what school skills do they need, so that we can begin to play a role in ensuring that they have the skills that are necessary for them to transition into a productive adult within Baltimore City and within our great nation. Thank you.
Charles.
Good evening. So from time to time, the school board and the direction the school board is leading, and the direction that parents and the communities may want to go, it may not be the same.
Sure.
How would you deal with that? How would you come to terms with that?
So I think that communication is definitely important, So even when those good ideas aren't taken, I mean, like you explain as to why. You help people to just have a better understanding as to what is working. Again, show them why, show them what the research says, show them how it would be better. And still allow them to be heard as well. We don't just, you weren't just written off and we didn't just take into consideration what you were saying, but we understand that and believe that this would be the best way. So again, just from talking, just sharing, when the things are going well, make sure you're putting out the stuff that's actually working, so people can begin to see, although what I wanted to do wasn't selected to be done, I can see that what is happening is actually good. And I think that again, open communication always help when it's two ways, as long as we are providing, you know, why we're doing what we're doing, why this seems to be work, and also helping them to being transparent with them and allowing them to see the progression, to see that it's doing well, or if it's not doing well, for us to even be able to speak on that and go back to the drawing board. So again, I think with any relation, and hopefully be able to come to a compromise, just like with any relationship, when one side doesn't agree, hopefully through communication, hopefully from talking and helping people to see the numbers, and helping people to see if something is successful, will help the two parties, the two sides, to come to a common ground.
Thank you.
Dr. Brooks.
Yes, good evening. So I've heard you
Hello.
share that you've worked with young people or taught young people on the middle grades, as well as high school grades and young adults. So what was the hardest decision impacting youth that you've had to make? Describe how you made the decision and the results of that decision.
The hardest decision impacting youth, just being real with you, is like putting people out of school. It's really difficult for me to do that, particularly when I know a lot of times their households are you know, not conducive all the time. So like putting students out of school is really a hard decision for me. When I've had to do it, it's definitely something that if it was something that could possibly cause someone to be harmed or them to harm themselves, it was no other option. Or if the code of conduct really spoke specifically to, you know, the endangerment, there are times when it has to be done. But I think that is something that's always been tough with me as an educator. How do I put someone out of a place that I know that they need, but at the same time trying to save the integrity of the culture and the climate of a space as well? So that's always that soft spot for me, always a difficult spot with me, you know, when you have someone there, or you know, or when others have given up on a student as well. You know, how do you help to reignite someone who's given up on a student or given up hope? You know, and that's at every level, from elementary school all the way up to adult education and even the collegiate level. You know, how do you continue to help to pump and to motivate and to keep your culture and climate integrity in place as well? So that's one of the hardest decisions for me as an educator, of deciding when someone should be removed from a system.
Thank you.
We're gonna go back around for another round. Got about 5 minutes left. So I'll go to you, Leah.
All right, so please share your understanding of the current priorities and operations of Baltimore City Public Schools. Include the blueprint for success if you're familiar with it.
Okay. So I do know a little bit about the blueprint. I know that Baltimore City is focusing now on the whole student, which I think is good, because we have to understand that, you know, mind, body, and soul. So we have to speak to academics, but also some of the physical needs and resources, some of the social, emotional things that come with living and growing up in an urban environment. I also saw and believe that another one is literacy. So without literacy, again, Frederick Douglass said, where literacy goes, freedom follows. So I think that's very important in regards to the blueprint, and also empowering people for leadership. You know, I think that is definitely awesome, because I think that every educator, regardless of the role that you play, from the janitor to the manager, you have to be empowered to understand that you are a leader, and that leadership is within all of us, that you're a leader of your classroom, you're a leader in the cafeteria. I believe she said that Diamond Monte, President Brown said earlier, even with the cafeteria worker, you're the leader of the cafeteria. You are the leader of whatever area it is that you're overseeing, helping people to be empowered to be leaders, because again, leaders beget other leaders. So if you begin to really work towards that type of empowerment, then leaders will begin to carry themselves as leaders, and the people that they're teaching will begin to buy into that they're leaders as well, and then they will begin to lead in a positive way. So that's some of my knowledge in regards to the blueprint, and particularly the 3 focus areas that I read and researched in regards to what Baltimore City is attempting to do now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Yes, I would like to know what you would give as an overall grade for the school system. And then I'd like to know, if it's not an A, what are some areas that you think need to be improved?
So I would clearly say a C plus, maybe a low B. And things that I think needs to be improved. I really think that we really need to begin to look at college and career exploration from the lower points and really helping students to understand what it is that they want to do with their futures and helping instructors to understand how do we get them there, you know, and providing, because everybody isn't going to college, you know. Some people want to get occupational jobs and things. People want to come right out of high school and working. What does that look like? Because you talk to a lot of young people who are coming out of school and they don't know what it is that they want to do, or many of them don't have it, or they have unrealistic ideas of what they can do. You know, you have a low GPA, but you're saying that you're going to be a neurological physician. You know, so really helping them to understand realistic goals on what it is that they want to do and being better prepared to go into the world and understanding what that looks like. And then if it's not occupational, understanding what it means to go to college, understand what it is that you're about to sacrifice, understand, and being able to have the ability to do so. Also, I think that some things that would help to get it is helping to get, you know, I was in Baltimore City for about 13 years, and everyone always want to talk about the negative things that are happening in Baltimore City, but I'm going to be really transparent with you. I have a lot of my students who have graduated and they're adults now, and they're doing well, and no one talks to them. No one is inviting them back in and asking them about their successes and what was it that helped you to be the successful and productive citizen that you are now. And these are students, again, my students from Frederick Douglass High School and Lombard and Southeast Middle School. A lot of times who people were saying were going to be throwaways and talked about the hard times at Douglass High, but no one is talking about how the hard times have helped some people to become awesome and productive citizens today. So I think that reaching back out and pulling those people in to be a part of the network of help would definitely help to raise it. I think it also would be a part of the helps to give it a good look in the eye of people, because a lot of times people point out the negative, but enough people aren't talking about the positive things that happen. And there are a lot of positive things that are happening. So again, make them come in and begin to see the good things that are happening, the good things that have happening, because they are a part of the good happenings that have happened in Baltimore City. And I think that it will help people to begin to change the way in which we speak, because a lot of times if you're coming into something only hearing negative, it's easier to point out the dirty places, and a lot of the clean places and the good things that are happening are overlooked because of one dirty spot. So that's one of the things that I think will help to raise that C plus of a high average to above average or possible superior.
All right, we're right at 30 minutes now for this interview. I do want to provide you an opportunity to just to provide any closing remarks or final words, or highlight anything particular that you want the community panel to be aware of as we end the interview.
Sure. Again, I really love the 410, 443, and now 667. I really do. It has made, you know, I really love the educational system here. I think that it needs awesome people who are committed and dedicated to it. Again, the city has been good to me, and I want to be able to be a part of the positive things that can happen within this city, a part of the work that's happening at a governance level. I think that I would be an effective part of the team, who would lead with my head, I would lead with my heart, and also with my hands. I would think about the things that I'm doing, keeping the children at the forefront of that, also understanding the heart, being moved by my feelings, and with the integrity of it all, and then with my hands. Not only I'm willing to govern, but I'm also willing to do the work, to get out and to help to paint a positive picture, get out and be in the community and speak well of the things, and helping to highlight the work that is happening, and to help people to understand how they can get involved so that they can make it better as well. Again, Dr. Jackie T. Caston, and I approve this message. Thank you.
Great, thank you, sir. Appreciate your time this evening.
All right, you all have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Bye.
All right, we'll transition now to the next candidate for the community panel. Just wanted to remind you to be keeping your scoring rubric up to date to make it easier for us as we continue through this process. The next candidate that we have, I believe I saw join already, Dr. Stefan Lallinger. And so I'll let him come online, come on camera. I see him here.
Ari, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just checking. Thank you.
Thanks for checking on that. Yes, we can hear you now. Just my name is Ari Giles. I'm the Chief of Policy and Partnerships, Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. I'm helping facilitate this community panel process. The panel is in receipt of your letter and your resume, and the purpose of the panel is to review candidates for appointment by the mayor to the 3 vacant seats we currently have on the Board of School Commissioners for the city of Baltimore. And so I'll quickly go through the attendees from and what organizations they're representing. And then I'll let you introduce yourself, and then we'll let them get into questions. Just be mindful of the length of your responses, making sure they're thorough but concise as well, so that we can get through a good amount of questions here. And so I'll go through now the list of attendees, starting with, we're joined by the Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City. We have Leah Stearns representing them. We have Brianna Kaufman from Baltimore Family Alliance. We have President Brown from Baltimore Teachers Union. We have Tasha Marshall from Disability Rights Maryland. Roger Schulman from Fund for Educational Excellence. Mackenzie Allen from the Maryland Alliance of Public Charter Schools. Jason Green from the Parent and Community Advisory Board. Charles Smith from PTA Council of Baltimore City, and Dr. Deborah Brooks representing the mayor's office as well. And so I'll let you introduce yourself, sir, and then we'll get into the questions.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. And it really is it's a privilege to be here, and good to see all of you, both familiar and unfamiliar faces. My name is Stefan Lallinger. The most important thing that you should know about me is that I'm the proud father of 3 daughters, only one of whom is school age. So you get a little bit of a sense for what my household is like these days. The other 2 aren't old enough. But the one who is school aged goes to Medfield Heights Elementary, and we're proud City Schools parents, and she's just had a wonderful experience there. And the other thing I think you should know about me is that I'm a proud lifelong educator, and I've held about every position you might hold in a school building. I started as an after-school coordinator. I became a teacher. I was a dean. I was an assistant principal, and I was a principal for many years. And then I also had the privilege of working in the largest school district in the country, in the New York City Department of Education, in the Chancellor's office. And currently, I'm the executive director of a think tank. So I spend most of my time researching and writing about education policy and managing a fellowship of the next generation of policy thinkers. So it's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to digging into some of those experiences and others in this next 30 minutes with all of you.
The first question will go to you, Aaliyah.
All right. The question I would like to propose is, please share your understanding of the current priorities and operations of Baltimore City Public Schools. Include the blueprint for success if you're familiar with it.
Absolutely. I'd love to start with the blueprint for success and start with a couple of notes of praise for the blueprint, because, and of course, not to be confused with the conveniently named Blueprint for Maryland's Future, which is state legislation, but specifically talking about Baltimore City's blueprint. The praise is that the focal points of the blueprint were really in some ways a little bit ahead of their time. And I say that, starting with the wholeness priority. So the first of 3 priorities. Obviously, after the pandemic, it's become really in vogue for a lot of districts around the country to think about this in a new way. But Baltimore City was really a little bit ahead of the curve here. Given that the blueprint came out a couple of years before the pandemic, and this focus on really seeing the whole child, seeing the school as a community center, thinking about all of the things that we do when we interact with kids in a culturally responsible and relevant way. All of those things are highly relevant for the moment and predated COVID. The second priority, of course, is this focus on foundational literacy, which also has had its moment in the sun nationally. You hear people talking about the science of reading in pretty much every state across this country. And so again, Baltimore City with this focus on foundational literacy, thinking about all of the elements of foundational literacy, everything from phonics to phonemic awareness and comprehension, and all of the things that young people need in order to be proficient readers and set them on a course of a lifelong love of learning and of reading. And then, of course, the third focus on capacity building and having every member, every employee in city schools see themselves as a leader and essentially empowering staff to do the things that it takes to make schools successful. And then, of course, we've got goals aligned to those, goals around wholeness, goals around MCAP scores in literacy and math. And I see you coming off mute there. That maybe means that I'm going on a little bit too long. So cut me off if I should stop.
Thank you.
Nope, I wasn't cutting you.
Okay, I was taking it as a sign because, you know, I'm a former teacher and principal. I can go on forever. So, so feel free to cut me off. The only thing that I would add to that is I know that in addition to the priorities and goals set forth by the blueprint, the board itself has its own priorities, a list of 7 priorities actually that the board has publicly stated that I think are very well aligned to the things that a school board should be thinking about. Things like ensuring there's excellent instruction in city schools, things like thinking about equity, things like thinking about the facilities, all of these things. I'm not going to go through each of the 7 line by line, but those are the general topics in which those priorities exist, I think are the right things. Of course, where the rubber meets the road is how are those things being implemented and executed by city schools. So I'm fairly familiar with the goals. I think they are generally quite spot on. I look forward to talking about how they actually come alive in classrooms and in schools across the city.
Thank you.
Good question.
Brianna?
Good evening. Can you please tell us how you see the role of the CEO and the role of the school board? How do they differ? How do they overlap? And how do they interact?
Absolutely. And one of the things I've been lucky enough to have the privilege of doing is actually getting the chance to interact with superintendents and boards in urban districts all across the country for several years, and have had a firsthand seat, not just in this city, but in other cities, to the ways in which superintendents or CEOs interact with their boards in ways that are both constructive in ways that are also destructive. And of course, the most important function for the CEO really relates to the day-to-day management of city schools, ensuring that all managerial decisions as they relate to personnel, ensuring that the highest quality leaders are in place centrally, and then of course, leadership in schools across city schools are in place, thinking about questions of curriculum and thinking about professional development for educators. All of the things that are far too many to enumerate here that the CEO has on their plate have to do with running the schools on a regular day-to-day basis. To contrast that a little bit with the board really sets the high-level vision and does that. You mentioned, you know, how do they sort of overlap? How do they contrast? Obviously does that in a highly coordinated fashion with the CEO and district leadership. But the board's role is not to get into the day-to-day. In fact, one of the things that I've seen across the country that has been destructive is board members that overstep their boundaries and try to call individual principals and demand that they take certain actions on things. Those are not, that's not the province of an effective board. And so boards really want to stick to high level, enacting policies that support the strategic plan and the mission and vision, and essentially passing policies that are supportive of the leadership and of city schools that enable the school district to actually enact and achieve its goals. And so they're quite distinct. Obviously, there are areas of overlap, and I think with good and proper communication, those areas are usually well agreed upon, and when they are well agreed upon, I think districts tend to function a lot better than when there's constant friction. The last thing I will say is obviously the board plays a really important role in oversight, and there's an important balance that has to be struck there between creating the conditions for success, but also ultimately the buck has to start with the board. Perhaps the most important role the board plays is selection and hiring and evaluation of the CEO or the superintendent. And that's the main lever that the board has to hold the CEO accountable. And that's a role that all board members should take extremely seriously. But again, there's a balance. There has to be both support in creating the conditions, and there has to be accountability and oversight.
You just spoke about the selection of the CEO, and our board just extended our CEO's contract for 1 year. So new board members may potentially be a part of determining what happens when the CEO's contract ends in 1 year. So what is your perspective on what factors should be used to evaluate what happens after that 1 year contract extension? And if the board does want to look for a new CEO, what types of things do you think they should take into consideration?
Thank you for that question, President Brown. And obviously this is a hypothetical question, so I want to be very clear. It's a hypothetical. There's a contract extension for 1 year, so the board could decide to further extend that contract at that time, or engage in a national search. And President Brown, I understand I heard and saw an interview recently that your leadership is calling for a national search, should that be the case. And if that is the case, that there is an opening, again, thinking about this as a hypothetical, I think it's really, really important to consider a couple of factors. And this is where I think I could be particularly helpful in considering the national scope. And one thing that I think is really important and typically underappreciated is we really have a crisis of longevity in the CEO and superintendent position all across this country. I mean, the fact that Dr. Santelises has been here for 8 years really is an anomaly. It's not the norm across the country. And the job is such that it is so complex and it takes so much time to learn that one of the most important things that we should be thinking about if and when there is an opportunity to think about a new superintendent or new CEO is, what is the commitment to this city? What does the commitment look like? Because change and positive change and driving student achievement requires dedication year after year after year, because this is such a complex enterprise. So I think the first thing is, and this is often hard to determine, right? You often, when you think about the profile of a CEO, particularly if you all are calling, and I know others will too, for a national search, you're thinking about folks who may hop from city to city and just want to sort of take the next best opportunity. And they may put in a few good years somewhere, and then they may jump somewhere else. So I think the first and most important thing is, will this person bring stability and longevity to the system? Do they have an eye for equity and student achievement? Will they sort of further in this legacy that has been well established here in Baltimore City, that we think about making sure resources get to those students who need them the most? And we take that for granted here in Baltimore City, but that's not the case everywhere. We even take that for granted at the state level with the blueprint. Now I'm talking about the state legislation, which is funneling more money to students who need it most. And so I think that the commitment to equity is key. And then finally, the commitment to continuing the improvement on our students' proficiency rates, which everybody would agree are not where they need to be. And we can all acknowledge the improvement that has been made while still agreeing that no one should be happy with the levels of proficiency for our students at this time in city schools.
So the next question is with Disability Rights Maryland, Tasha.
Thank you. How familiar are you with the legal rights of students with disabilities?
Thank you for that question, Ms. Marshall. I would say very familiar. As a former teacher and former principal, this is something that I take extremely seriously. And I've had the privilege and the opportunity to spend time on countless in countless IEP meetings, making sure that we as an IEP team did everything we could to make sure that any student with a disability that needed additional support or additional services had all of the support and services available to them. And so, of course, special education law is mostly grounded at the federal level. Of course, various states supplement that, Maryland included. But my understanding of special education law and the rights of students with disabilities is rooted in the general principle established in IDEA that all students are entitled to what we call FAPE, free and appropriate public education, and that we meet those needs by creating IEPs for students and ensuring that everyone involved in the IEP is doing everything that they can to ensure that those students are successful. And so I would say I'm very familiar, but I'm the kind of person who always feels like they have more to learn. And so I'm never satisfied with what I know, but I have the privilege and the benefit of having had many years of experience in schools, serving students with disabilities, both from a teacher standpoint and from a school leadership standpoint. So I appreciate the question. I'm happy to elaborate on anything if you'd like any further clarification.
Thank you so much.
Roger, Fund for Educational Excellence.
Thanks for being here. As you may know, the school system's budget is somewhere in the $1.6, $1.7 billion range. And obviously part of the role of the board is to approve a budget and oversee that budget. Can you share a little bit about your experience managing budgets, explain a little bit about what your role was in managing a budget or overseeing a budget, and sort of the size and scope of the budgets you've worked with?
Absolutely. Well, in terms of oversight, nothing touching the billions, but I do have some experience with budgets in the billions. I think my most important and most applicable experience was as a school principal, where we had a $10 million budget. We had, in the system where I worked, we had a tremendous amount of autonomy. So I, as the principal, controlled the entire $10 million budget. Its ebbs and its flows, which meant that when we saw a reduction in our per pupil funding from one year to the next, I had to make the difficult decisions, which of course I did in consultation with the community and with teachers. But at the end of the day, the buck stopped with me, and I had to make difficult decisions that come with any budget cuts. And so that's been my most direct experience. And I think I draw most of my perspective on what it means to have oversight over a budget from those years managing that budget. Because even though $10 million in relation to $1.7 billion is not even in the same ballpark, the types of decisions that had to be made, the fact that the budget was a values document, that where we decided to spend our money as a school community spoke about the values that we had as a school community. The fact that if we had to make difficult decisions, the decisions we were making people for were our kids. They were our neighbors. They were people who've been with us for years. They impacted those folks. So these aren't just numbers on a page. They represent decisions that impact people at a human level. And I think that's the most important thing to keep in mind. And I'd say that's my most direct experience. I have had quite a bit of experience in terms of being on the research side of researching some of the issues facing some of the largest budgets in the country in terms of urban school districts. Particularly, I did a bunch of research and writing around how COVID dollars were spent and the fiscal cliff that, quite frankly, Baltimore City navigated a lot better than many other school districts around the country. Baltimore's on track, as most folks on this call know, to have spent all of the COVID dollars by the time the funding runs out. And then also have had the privilege of working in the chancellor's office of the largest school district in the country, which has a $40 billion budget. Didn't think we'd get to a number higher than 1.7 billion. But of course, I didn't have an oversight role there. I got to play a role in some of the difficult management level decisions and making recommendations for where we thought monies should be spent within that system. Again, a gigantic system. But if I understood your question correctly, you were interested in oversight, and I did not have oversight over that budget, but I did over our school's budget. And I should also mention I've served on a few nonprofit boards that, again, don't approximate the billions, but are more in the millions ballpark. I appreciate the question.
Mackenzie?
What role do you see charter schools play in the city schools portfolio?
That's a great question. It's not a softball question there. We're getting right to it. Well, what I will say is, I actually think in this really complex ecosystem of schools that we have here in Baltimore City, they play an important role. I say complex ecosystem because, of course, we have neighborhood schools and we have schools of choice that are both charter and that are not charter. And so there's a complex ecosystem here. I think the charter schools that exist play an important role. There's, I believe, greatly in the give and take of the agreement that charter schools make with the larger system, which is in exchange for autonomy, which is really, really important because you get to see great innovation and you see great creativity, there's accountability. Both folks who run charter schools enter into that agreement knowing, great, we more autonomy and we have to deliver results. And folks in the rest of the system understand that agreement well and give autonomy in exchange for accountability. So it has to be in balance. And I have to say, I've worked in some districts where it's been out of balance, that have very different relationships with the charter schools in the district, New York City for one, New Orleans for another. And I think even though it may not always feel this way, folks in Baltimore City should feel proud that this issue is not as acrimonious as it is in a lot of other places. And I think we should always be striving for a place of strengthening the relationships and ensuring that that balance, that bargain, that both sides willingly sign up for, autonomy for accountability, that bargain remains in place.
Jason?
Please describe, how you doing? Please describe the role you think families and communities should play in decision-making at the district level.
An absolutely instrumental role. I mean, I think this is the sort of million-dollar question for boards, which is how do they reflect the desires and the needs and the wants of a community? Because in an ideal situation, a board reflects its broader community. And again, we have a unique system here in Baltimore City where you have 2 members that are elected. And you have the rest that are appointed by the mayor. And clearly, through this process, the mayor takes that process very seriously. If you consider the caliber of people who are on this call doing these interviews, if you consider the amount of time it takes to go through this entire process. And so, Mr. Green, I think that it's a great question. The question is, how do board members really channel the desires of the community? And the only way, in my mind, that happens is through regular communication, particularly where you have a system where board members aren't only supposed to represent one little district. They're not just supposed to represent the neighborhood that they're from or the part of the city that they're from. Board members are supposed to reflect the entire community and the desires of the entire community. And the only way you can do that is to get out there and talk to people, is to get out there and visit schools, is to get out there and have conversations with people that can be difficult conversations, but that are illuminating and that bring different perspectives together. So to answer your question, I think they play the main role. We should be reflecting those desires and those wishes and those demands. And the real million-dollar question for every single board member is how they can be the most effective conduit for those types of desires and needs and wants.
Charles?
3 daughters, you say. As someone who grew up with 6 sisters, you have some interesting times ahead of you, let me tell you. All right, as a former principal, you'll definitely understand where this question is coming from. Many times where the school board and the administration may want to lead may not necessarily be where communities and parents want to follow. How would you bridge that gap? How would you try to bring that together?
It's an excellent question. And I think it's based on a number of different factors. It's a good question. It's a hypothetical, and so I'll answer it this way. Anytime a board is making decisions or thinking about making decisions that they're hearing from community does not want to go along with, there's some warning signs should go off for board members that say, let's slow down. Let's go have some conversations with folks. Make sure they understand where we're coming from and we understand where they're coming from. Because it could be the case that the board is undertaking some very difficult decisions, as boards have to do. We were just talking about budget cuts. I mean, that's some of the most difficult work that there is. Someone is going to be unhappy when you're starting to talk about budget cuts, because the cuts have to come from somewhere. And so the question really is do the community members that are voicing opposition have all of the information they need to fully understand and appreciate the scope and the magnitude of the types of decisions that are being made? If that is true, do the board members really understand where community members are coming from in terms of what it is that they are voicing their concerns about? And so there's this give and take that needs to happen. And it's not a question I could just sort of answer, well, it always goes down this way or it always goes down that way. It really depends on the issue. But I think as long as board members are always willing to listen, always willing to slow down, always willing to have conversations and make it be sort of a give and take and back and forth, it doesn't mean that board members don't and won't take difficult decisions that people don't always understand. That's leadership at the end of the day. You're going to have to make some decisions that are unpopular, but you have to make sure you lay the groundwork to having had the conversations with people to understand where they're coming from before embarking on any particular decision.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dr. Brooks.
Yes, so good evening. You've shared with us the multiple roles that you've held in a school level and also at a district level. So what was the hardest decision impacting youth that you've had to make? Describe how you made that decision and the result of that decision.
That's a great question. Hardest decision. I'm gonna have to reserve the right to come back if I think of an even harder one after I give you my answer. These have always happened to me in the context of budget cuts, just because that was so real, and because, as I said, as a principal in the system where I worked, the buck stopped with me. And so whenever we had budget cuts, we had to make very difficult decisions. I'll give you a very specific example. One year, we had to significantly scale back the after-school transportation for our students. Now, that might sound a little trivial, right? Oh, it's just after-school transportation. Kids don't have to do after school. But that's not the case at all. I mean, for some of our students, particularly students who have the least ability to be able to even get to school or stay after school for an after-school activity, that transportation is the difference between something that makes them want to come to school every day and something that makes them want to stay home. And so what we ended up doing was instead of cutting all transportation to after school, we were able to scale it back. And we made a bargain with some of our students and our families. And we said, listen, this is not a decision that we want to take. It's something that we have to do. But what the bargain we're making with you is, if you want to continue to participate, and we want you to continue to participate, you're going to have to exchange slightly longer commute times in exchange for participation. And that was not something that I enjoyed doing. It was a really difficult decision, particularly knowing the individual students who benefited so much from staying after school to play basketball, staying after school to be in the chess club, being in our technology club. But those are the real decisions where, real decisions have trade-offs. And so we had to get creative about the solution and ultimately make difficult decisions. And I know that it impacted students. Students ended up spending more time on the bus for those who decided to stay after school than other students, which meant they got home later, which meant, all sorts of cascading effects for those kids. So I didn't take the decision lightly, but I tried to find a way to make sure that we didn't completely eliminate something that I thought was really, really important for the kids at our school.
Thank you.
And just time said we've got about 5 minutes left. So I want to just, for the community panel, see if you have specific questions you want to return to. I will go back to Leah, but I did want to ask other community panel members, if you did have specific questions that were burning you really want to hear from, just drop it in the chat and we'll get back to it. So Leah, you have the next question.
All right. So how would you advocate for young people or parents who don't believe that the school board doesn't listen to them?
Another great question, Leah. I appreciate that question. I think a couple of things. One is, oftentimes, if a parent or a student is coming to a school board meeting and they are taking the time to sign up for public comment, they're taking the time to voice their concern, it means that something, in most cases, not always, something was missed along the way. There were opportunities for engagement before we even got to that point. And so one thing that I would say is active and regular communication and listening, seems obvious, is extremely important. And so if you get to the place where folks are feeling frustrated with the board, thinking about venues outside of board meetings, for instance, you know, a 3-minute public comment isn't always, where there's usually not a response, doesn't always feel like the most productive and helpful communication for folks. And so I think it's really important, it's incumbent on board members to make sure they're taking the time to fulfill their roles as people who reflect community will outside of those structures of the board meeting, to be able to actually make time for people and understand where it is they're coming from and understand what the frustration is and why they feel like their voice is not being heard. So I think that's the most important, probably the most important characteristic that a board member could have, is ensuring that they're able to make people feel heard. And the last thing I'll say about that, Leah, and I think this is an important point, is making sure people feel heard doesn't always mean telling people what you think they want to hear. It means telling people the truth, maybe giving them a new perspective, and it means taking what they say at face value. And sometimes they'll convince you and they'll change your mind. But sometimes you listen to folks and you still don't have a better answer for them. But the very act of listening to people and making sure people feel heard, they may leave the conversation with a new appreciation for why a certain decision can't be the way that they hope the decision might be. Or you leave the conversation and you have a new perspective, and you bring that back to the board and you make people feel heard in that way.
Thank you.
And not seeing anything from the community panel in the chat, and being at about 30 minutes, I did want to give you opportunity to share any final words and thoughts that you have with the community panel as we're closing out.
Just that I really appreciated the opportunity to have this conversation with you. As you can tell, I'm passionate about education. I'm passionate about my own children. I'm excited for all of my children to take their educational journey through city schools. I'm committed to the city. My wife is committed to the city. My wife was born and raised in Baltimore, left for a little bit, but she found her way back home. And we're just excited to continue this journey together. The one other thing that I'll point out that I think is important to be said is, you know, outsiders, and by outsiders, I mean folks who are not from Baltimore, and I also mean folks who are not necessarily in education, find all sorts of reasons to denigrate the great work that people do day in and day out. And not everybody understands how hard it is to be an educator, to be a leader, to be a part of the system. And not everyone understands that great things happen in city schools every single day. I get to see it with my own daughter's education. I've had occasion to see it in cities all across the school, also all across the system, excuse me. And it's important that we tell the story of all of the fantastic things that are happening in city schools, while we also keep an eye on the ways that we can make things better for the generation of students who are in city schools right now. And I think that's an important balance to strike. Anyway, I appreciate the time, very humbled by the opportunity. I think I could bring some interesting context and an interesting lens to this board, and would look forward to the opportunity to serve if you all agree. And if you don't, I respect your decision. Thank you so much for your time.
Great, thank you. Great, and I will give our final interview, give Eric an opportunity to turn his camera on. This will be the final interview for the evening for the group.
We still have Dr. Lallinger on.
It's an open, it is an open link, so anyone is able to join and even stay on if it's public.
Oh, okay.
But thanks for noting that. And as I stated that, I do see Mr. Jameson has joined. So just as I was noting, my name is Ari Giles. I'm Chief of Policy and Partnerships here at the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. We help and facilitate this evening's interview. Thanks for bearing with us. We've been running a little over today, but we'll have about 30 minutes with you from when we get started. So what we'll do today is an open interview. As I mentioned, it's open to the public, so anyone can join and stay on while we're here. We'll be recorded and will be posted in accordance with the Open Meetings Act. So just letting you know that as we're embarking on this. So what we'll do now, I'll go through the attendees who will be asking the questions. They're members of the community panel. The community panel has the charge of reviewing applicants for Board of School Commissioners and providing a recommendation to the mayor on a list of potential appointees, of which the mayor will interview, select, and nominate for the 3 vacancies that we currently have. And so, so I'll go through the community panel members who are with us this evening. They'll ask some questions, and you'll introduce yourself, and then they'll ask some questions. So as I'm pulling up my list, first we have from the Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City, we have Leah Stearns. From Baltimore Family Alliance, we have Brianna Kaufman from Baltimore Teachers Union. We have their President Brown, with us this evening. Disability Rights Maryland is represented by Tasha Marshall from the Fund for Educational Excellence. We have Roger Schulman. Mackenzie Allen is here from the Maryland Alliance of Public Charter Schools. From the Parent and Community Advisory Board, we have Jason Green from the PTA Council of Baltimore City. We have Charles Smith, and the mayor's office is being represented by Dr. Deborah Brooks, Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. So if you could introduce yourself, sir, and then we'll get into the questions.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Jameson II. I'm a native of Baltimore, born and raised, a product of Baltimore City Public School System. I am a current doctoral candidate at Morgan State University. My concentration is in urban educational leadership. And so I'm very interested in just the relationship between, our families, communities, as well as our schools, and how that impacts or relates to student achievement. So that's kind of what I'm focused on in the field of education. I work for the federal government by day. I also have a nonprofit organization that I run and maintain, Rising Over Standards and Excelling. And so all of our work are, with children and their families. We have a mentoring program. We partner with a couple of different churches and, just grassroots organizations, just to try to, pour into our students and to our youth. And that's kind of where my passion falls in line with mentoring. So just a little bit about me. Happy to be here today, and look forward to meeting with you all tonight.
Great. Leah, you have first question?
All right, the first question I would like to propose is, please share your understanding of the current priorities and operation of Baltimore City Public Schools, including the Blueprint for Success, if you're familiar with it.
Thank you. I have a little familiarity with what's going on in schools. Like I said, I obviously don't work in the school system, but just in my kind of everyday travels or what have you, and out in my interactions, with people connected, it seems like there's definitely a great push towards, just increasing just our level of, I guess, whether you call it student achievement or educational proficiency. I think that's something that's kind of big. Obviously, we want the best for our students, and we want to create the best environment for that to happen. I feel like the state education is kind of, or in the state education in the city is kind of concurrent with just kind of our where we are politically and socially in our community. So it's a lot dealing with equity and inclusion, and just making sure that everyone's voices are heard, and And then of course there's the big thing is violence and things, and we always want to make sure our students are protected in our, in their everyday goings in and out of schools and things like that. So I would say, just if I had to sum it into three, it would kind of be violence, increasing our achievement or our student achievement, and then just kind of that push for equity.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
The next question is, share how you see the role of the CEO and the role of the school board. How do they differ? How do they overlap? And how do they interact?
I think that I like the way you kind of segmented the question. I think there's a great bit of interaction. I would think through the meetings with the CEO as well as the board. A lot of course, information is shared. A lot of fact sharing, and a lot of just ideas and knowledge sharing. I feel that the sentiment, I would say the general sentiment of the board and the general ideas of the board should be in line with the CEO. I know that they are two separate entities, but I would like to think that compromises is probably a big part of what you all do. Just kind of making sure that there's kind of one band, one sound, for lack of a better way of saying it. And so, although the roles are different, I think that the CEO is open to input and ideas, but ultimately the CEO is the one that kind of communicates the message and is kind of, the face, and kind of, I would say the final decision maker, as opposed to, on the board and, providing votes and making sure there's a general consensus.
Part of the role of the Board of School Commissioners is to negotiate with the employees as unions. What do you know about the current issues and/or dynamics of the school board and unions that represent city schools employees?
I'm not too familiar with the actual issues. I know from just from kind of interacting with some teachers, some of the issues that they normally bring up, or recently, I would say, bring up a lot on like teacher training and development, staff development, professional development in that way. That's kind of a big thing, especially, post-pandemic and, with getting away from our more virtual posture and moving more into, of course, our ongoing hybrid posture. Just making sure that, there is understanding, that there is knowledge, that there is confidence and ability to be able to kind of facilitate, the different platforms, different learning platforms that we use to make sure that our students are engaged. I know a lot of teachers are big on increasing student engagement as well as parent engagement. And of course, there's always the big one. There's the pay. It's no, I guess, secret that, the job that our teachers do, is phenomenal. And, often or traditionally, they haven't necessarily been compensated, in the ways that teachers kind of want to. And so I would think that, like I said, pay and student engagement and just navigating through our current hybrid postures, I would say probably, three of the top issues that teachers may have.
Gotcha.
How familiar are you with the rights of students with disabilities, the legal rights of students with disabilities?
Great question. I won't say that I'm, too familiar with the specific rights of students. If I had to expound on that, I would assume that they are closely related to, the rights of just any human being with disabilities, right? And so we want to make sure that, we provide special accommodations to those who may need it. And whether that, of course, that can mean a bevy of things. It can be, from mental services to physical services. Like I said, post-pandemic, with us kind of moving into more of a hybrid culture, I know that we have been more amicable to some of the needs of our students and families, just by making sure that we're, like I said, accommodating and make sure we're serving them. But as far as their specific rights, down to the manual, I'm not too familiar with, but everyone deserves to be treated, equally and equitably, and fairly. And so I would assume that it's around those points.
Thank you.
Roger.
Yep. Thanks for being here. The budget of the school system is somewhere between 1.6 and 1.7 billion dollars, and part of the role of the board is to approve the budget and to have oversight over the budget. Can you share with us any experiences you have managing or overseeing a budget, what specific roles you played with relation to a budget, and sort of the size and scale of that budget? And just being clear, I don't expect that anyone's had experience with a $1.7 billion budget. So I'm not looking for that answer, but just trying to understand.
I'm happy because I do not have experience with such a large budget as that. But in my nonprofit, as executive director, and working with the board of directors in my nonprofit, we have a few different roles. And so, of course, budget construction, just with our programs, whether it be a special event, whether it be our mentoring program, or whether it be any of our community events and giveaways. We do budget construction, of course, allocation. We fundraise. We make sure we are up on all of our audits, or everything dealing with the IRS and things like that. And so I would say that our annual budget usually is around $10,000. So a small fraction of what the school board is, but of course, we know the importance of the budget, and just making sure that the funds that, especially the funds that we raise, are allocated, and make sure that things are itemized and things and all of that. I have probably the largest grant that we've had, and we submitted a budget for, was probably $5,000. So that's probably the largest kind of single budget item that I've managed, over the last few years. But like I said, only a fraction of what you all experience with the school board.
Mackenzie?
What role do you see charter schools play in the city schools portfolio?
We're definitely in the age of choice, and providing choice for our students and their families. And so charter schools are definitely a very important, they have a very important place in our city schools. I'll say their role in the future is probably going to be increasing, because like I said, we're in this age of choice, and with the ways that kind of private funds are being allocated into the school systems, or into our charter schools, or into organizations that are starting schools. I just don't see that kind of decreasing anytime soon, just because people do want the opportunity to have more of a say or influence in the curriculum that their children are being educated by. And so I do feel like it's going to continue to grow. I also think the success of some of the charter schools that have been, over the past 10 years or so, will only kind of speak to the need, or to the desire, probably more so, of our students to to continue to enroll in them, especially if they can kind of meet the standards that the charter schools have. And so I think it'll definitely be something that, we'll have to continue to educate ourselves on and continue to find space for, alongside with, of course, our public schools as well.
Jason?
Yes. Eric, how you doing?
Okay.
Please describe the role you think families and communities should play in decision-making at the district level.
I do think our families and communities deserve a voice. I know this necessarily hasn't traditionally been something that has been, a mainstay. But as far as decision making, it kind of goes along with the last question, and with charter schools, is like we can see that there's a push for that, and that families, want more input into, some of the things, whether it be curriculum, whether it be fund allocation, they wanted more of a say into it. And I think that that's one of the reasons why people are more inclined to enroll their children into charter schools versus public schools, because they feel like they can have more of a say. And so I think that the role, to be honest, should be increased in our city schools, just because, as we know, and when we talk about equity and inclusion, culture is so important, and it's so important in education. And so I think a lot of times our communities kind of house a lot of our culture, and of course our families do as well. And I think traditionally in the school systems, maybe those kind of three entities weren't necessarily they weren't valued as much. And so now that I feel like we as a society know the importance of families and communities and culture and education, we want to promote that. And so I do think that we will see kind of increased engagement from our families and our communities in the education system. And so our role, I guess our role as leaders in education will be to try to facilitate that as best as possible, whether that's at a district level, as you said, where, we're kind of finding a way to hone in those ideas and those recommendations, or also just kind of on a school level, and even more locally, to the different schools in different communities, whether that's partnering with different organizations to try to bring more resources to our schools and to our students. I think that that's kind of where education is leading, is us more collaborating between schools, between families, and between communities, in order to kind of increase the quality of the educational product.
Charles? Charles, are you there?
Yes, sorry, I was talking to my son. Okay, it's been a long day. Oftentimes, the school board and the administration may be at odds with where the community wants them to go. They may want to go one way, and the community and the parents may want to go another way. As a board member, how would you work to bring those two together?
I think the first thing to do is just to really understand exactly what, the communities or the families are seeking, right? And so, whether that's I know the board often has open meetings or segments of the meetings that are open, and where they're getting a lot of feedback and recommendations. But I also think that, as a commissioner, it's probably important, and probably one of the roles of the commissioner is to, visit some schools and really talk, to teachers, to parents, and whether that's, like I said, going to the schools, whether that's through community events and things like that. But I think finding some way to just understand what the issues are, and what the recommendations are. And then I really think it's, like everything, like, working with people, it's just about compromising, and, how can we mesh these ideas and mesh kind of the best of both sides. Not, of course, in an interview, it sounds great, right? It sounds easy to do. But the give and take, really has to be something that's really explored. And so I would think, as a commissioner, it's probably very important to kind of kind of be boots on the ground a little bit and really understand some of the issues, the importance, because, just reading them off a sheet of paper may not provide the same impact or context as, really talking with people and kind of hearing, firsthand acknowledge of what's going on. And then also kind of just being an advocate for those, as leaders, we are advocates of, the people that we serve. And so, advocating even to, broader educational audiences, those issues, I think therein lies you'll find a way to kind of compromise and converge on those ideas. But I think it really starts with just kind of being more engaged with the people that, has the people that experience these things and have these issues and, offer their solutions and things like that first.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Dr. Brooks?
Yes. What was the hardest decision impacting youth that you have had to make? Describe how you made the decision and the result of that decision.
Hardest. Could you repeat again?
Sure.
Sorry.
What was the hardest decision impacting youth that you had to make? Describe how you made that decision and the result of that decision.
I would say probably the most difficult decision for me or for us as an organization is I feel like this the thing that's coming to mind the most, and I'm trying to think past it, but you just got to go with your first thought. And it really was COVID and how to handle everything that came with it. And so, we, as far as my organization, we held our mentoring program twice a month. And we had about 45 kids at the time of the pandemic. And you're just kind of navigating, what our best practices was from the CDC and, communicating with the church we were partnering at, where we actually held those programming sessions and just kind of making sure that we were doing the best things for, our students and their families. And so it was a really difficult decision to, for instance, to shut it down, right? It was easy to do because the whole world shut down, right? Our small program wasn't going to go against, the recommendations of, from our federal government. However, just through the pandemic, figuring out different ways to engage the students to make sure that, we were still being a resource to them and that we were also still kind of feeding into them and making sure that we were still helping them during a very difficult time, especially with them navigating going to school from their living rooms for the first time ever, right? And so just kind of navigating that was just a very difficult decision. But the most difficult was probably knowing when to reopen and making sure that we were following different guidelines, making sure that we had the parent support, making sure that the students were even still interested, right? And it was just very difficult to kind of navigate what we should do and how we should do it, particularly when, you're servicing, students middle and high school age. And so, the ins and outs and the intricacies of it, they didn't necessarily always understand. Right. But, we had to kind of make just some difficult choices just as, when we opened up, for instance, we dropped back to once a month. Right. Well, first it was kind of quarterly just to kind of work it in. And then, we got back up to once a month. And then those kind of decisions were difficult. And they were also difficult when it came to our mentors. Right. And making sure that they were able to still give their time and their just their talents, to our program. And so the result was, to be honest, that, we ultimately figured it out. We still maintained contact. We were still able to do some of the things that we traditionally did. Can't say that everything was 1,000% the same, because when you go through things, you never go through them and come out the same. Hopefully we came out better. You came out with more awareness and knowledge. And I think we're at a place now where, we're still able to give out a quality product of programming, to, at this point, a whole new cohort of students, you know what I mean? Because, over those 4 years, the students that we have, have moved on to, whether it's to college or entrepreneurship or, just a different grade level and things like that. We had to kind of at least essentially start to train over, so to speak, from our marketing to our recruitment of mentors and mentees. And so, it was very difficult to kind of navigate the pandemic and just kind of rebrand, so to speak, with all that we learned and with all the different changes in our society. But we like to think that, we did the best that we could and that we're still able to serve. I mean, that's ultimately what we want to do is serve. And so one of the ways that I would kind of measure the goodness of the result is that, now we have some of our students who were mentees, during that time now have come back to become mentors and to kind of help us to continue, the work that we're doing. And that's how I guess we can say that, we did a good job of kind of navigating that, even though there were some bumps in the road.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have about 3 minutes left. So I'll go back to you, Leah, and then I'll just ask what I've asked previously, which is if there was other community panel members that had specific questions they wanted to add to put that in the chat. We can revisit it. But I'll go back to you, Leah.
All right. So, how would you advocate for young people or parents who believe that the school board doesn't listen to them?
How would I advocate for them? First thing I would do is listen to them. You know what I mean? Like, and kind of hear them out. And my question to them would kind of be, hey, what do you feel like what issue do you feel like was unheard? And then, just kind of listen to them and make sure I hear them out. But then also kind of reassure them that, kind of tell them some of the things that the board does, or has in store to hear more, to gather more information, and to implement it. But also what I will ultimately do is just try to encourage them that of the board's role, of the CEO's role, and just let them know that, although it is a process and it can get kind of politicized and some, when it comes to some issues, the board is here. There are opportunities to be heard. Let them come to, some meetings or the open sessions in the meetings and kind of just make sure that they're aware of all the different opportunities that they have to voice their concerns. And then hopefully, you will see kind of that increase in presence. But yeah, that's what I would do. Ultimately, is really just got to touch base with them.
Thank you.
And I want to give you the opportunity just for any closing remarks or final words for the panel, as we have about a minute left.
I kind of just a general question I had. I've kind of always wanted to ask, so I hope this is a good opportunity to do this, a good time to do this. But I guess my question is kind of what ideally does the panel seek in an ideal candidate?
So I don't want to speak on behalf of the panel. It's composed of an array of different, advocates and interests. And so I think, the community panel process was designed so that we did get a diverse array of different organizations that represent different interests. And that group would nominate to the mayor finalists that represent what the Board of School Commissioners needs. So I wouldn't want to speak to. I don't know if any of the community panel members are interested in responding to that from their specific perspective, or anyone that may have been on here for a while, if they're interested in speaking to it. But you know, the goal of this panel is to review the array of different candidates we get, and try to recommend to the mayor those who would be best fit from their education experience and background to advocate for the best interests of students and their families. I hear anything from my community panel members. So with that, just wanted to say I appreciate your time. Thank you for interviewing and engaging with us this evening. We're right at our time here. So just wanted to say I appreciate you, and we'll be communicating decisions from this group with everyone in the days to come.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
And for the panel, we will meet on Thursday for the next round of interviews. And for the sake of the minutes, it is 8:19. And so we'll be closing out the minutes for this meeting, 8:19 p.m. on June 18th, 2024. Thanks for your participation, everyone. We will be following up with some communications regarding the decision made today around scoring. Unless anyone has anything else, then please enjoy your evening.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Take care.
Good night. Thank you.